And we're live. Guys, I know it's a little different now because we don't play the intro. I've explained to you all we have a little audio issue with that, but we are here tonight. So I want to first thank everyone for joining us. I've posted it out on Twitter and my Gab account about tonight because tonight is not like most nights. Tonight's show will only be able to broadcast it live because the presentation we're going to share with you guys, the first half is actually behind a paid presentation that CPL still has on their website, and I'll share that with you guys tonight as well. So Michelle has given me the courtesy to be able to play it live tonight, but I've also agreed, and I understand why, that I will take it down after because she is still trying to use this to try and help promote CPL. So with that, I'm happy to be joined again by Casey, who's my right hand in this with Reality Check. And then Michelle is joining us. She's going to watch the presentation with us tonight. And then she's going to stick around for questions afterwards. So if you guys have any, if you'll hold them till after the presentation, I would appreciate it because I won't be able to really see my chat rooms because we'll be using my screen to show the video. And with that, I'll let you two ladies say hello and introduce yourselves, and then we'll get straight to the presentation so this will be a couple hours.
All right. Hello, everybody.
And hello, Michelle here from Minnesota, and happy to be part of it, Laura. Thanks for having us on and for airing this really important video.
Yeah, it's, this is where my heart is. Michelle, I've had the fortune of meeting, and I would consider her a friend. You get to meet amazing people. Through all this, I have been able to meet some amazing people. She's one of them. And I really like Michelle because she puts her boots on the ground. She doesn't just, come around and talk about things. She pushes back on Capitol Hill. This woman is a fighter. So I'm just happy that I've got to meet you and that again, I have your number and that you'll come on because trust me, I'll have you on whenever you want to come on. You're just so daggum busy. So it's finding the time because she is busy. I think it took us 3 weeks to schedule this one, which I would rather you be busy fighting back for our children than, come on here. So, but you are welcome anytime. So with that, I'm going to, and I'll let Casey, I'm interested in hearing Casey's feedback from this presentation because she's not watched it yet. I reviewed it probably a few days back. Again, Alex, he writes for, and help me, Michelle, if I miss anything. I know he's wrote for the Epic Times. He's also on the New American Alliance? Did I get that right? I had it wrote down.
Magazine.
Yeah, New American Magazine. He runs that channel as well. He knows a lot, and I'm going to warn all of you now that the information he goes through, he is fast. You can tell he's trying to get as much out as he can in an hour. And you really have to listen. So if you're not out in chat talking back and forth very much, I understand because you have to be dialed in to listen to what all this man says. Now I'm going to go ahead and get it started. This presentation is an hour and 7 minutes long. Again, thanks everybody for joining us. Again, this broadcast will be taken down afterwards. So you guys are the only ones that's going to see it. Unless you go to the CPL website and then, support CPL and watch it there. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get it started. And again, thanks everybody for being here. And we'll see you back right after this for some questions. All right, make sure I blow up my screen for you guys so you can see it all. And I'm going to have the audio maxed out. So this is as loud as it gets if you have to turn it up on your end.
They found the joke about how they found it. Hey everybody, what an honor to be here. Thank you guys so much. I guess you guys all heard that they found the joke about how they found the cure for COVID right here. It's a riot, right? In Minneapolis. 1 second you are a murderer for going out of your house, and the next second, if you don't go out of your house, you're a racist because we have to protest, right? True story. Absolutely crazy. Another joke while we get the presentation up. Socialism, and if you're from Cuba or Venezuela, please don't spoil the joke because you already know. But what did socialists and communists use for lighting before candles? Light bulbs and electricity in the good old days before communism and socialism. So yeah, it's true. If I had $1 for every time socialism worked, I'd have $0. But unfortunately, we are headed now, guys, very rapidly in that direction. Let's see. There we go. If you look at the polling data, my generation, millennials, and it's always very embarrassing to admit that you're a millennial because then everybody just assumes you're an idiot, and it's not entirely unjustified. But my generation, we are now 70% say that we will vote for socialists. This was a poll released in 2019 by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. So all these other battles that we're fighting, they're all going to be for nothing if we don't deal with this crisis. And the next generation after us, it's even worse. If you look at the religious data, it's even more terrifying. Millennials will be the first generation in all of American history where self-described Christians are in the minority. Okay, the next generation is going to be even worse. This is all deliberate. It's all by design. And so as Christianity goes out the door, what's coming in? Well, just a couple weeks ago in California, the State Board of Education voted unanimously for this new ethnic studies model curriculum. And it sounds like you guys have something similar coming to Minnesota. And among other joys, you'll find that the children in elementary school will be chanting to the demon gods of the Aztecs, the gods of human sacrifice and cannibalism, for help becoming warriors for social justice. True story. It's right there in the ethnic studies curriculum. The guy who wrote this actually wrote in a book that we should pray to these Aztec gods of human sacrifice and cannibalism for help waging a counter-genocide against Christians. Okay? And all that sounds totally crazy, and it should, but what happens when the next generation grows up believing this stuff? Well, very bad things. A big part of the ethnic studies curriculum is, of course, the critical race theory. And I just published a column on this in the Epoch Times. I interviewed a lady who had grown up in China under Chairman Mao. And wonderful lady. I serve on a board with her. Her name is Lily Tang Williams. I encourage you to go look at that article. What she told me was absolutely terrifying. She said that this is exactly what she saw in China under Mao when she was a little girl in an indoctrination center masquerading as a public school. She said they divided the people up into two categories. They had the black classes and the red classes. The black classes were the evil ones. They were the ones who came from a family that might have had land or a business or property of some sort. Conservatives, Christians also fell in that class. And it was something that you were born with. You couldn't get rid of it. Even with all the self-criticism in the world, even if you turned in your parents to the Communist Party, it was just part of who you were. It's your identity. The other class, the red classes, that was the revolutionary soldiers, the communists, the landless peasants, and so on. So, it didn't happen right away, but give a few years of this kind of indoctrination, what happened? Very soon, tens of millions of people were slaughtered. That's how serious the stakes are, guys. They're not doing this for nothing. They know exactly what they're doing. Now, there is some good news with this whole COVID pandemic, and I'll touch on that before we leave here tonight. Massive exodus from the public school system, massive increase in homeschooling, and we can praise God for that. It's wonderful news. Now, Kimberly stole my thunder here a little bit, and I'm glad she did. Totalitarians throughout the 20th century have understood that the way to total power is by grabbing the minds of the young. And this is a real quote by Hitler. You know, you see so many of the fake quotes. This one came up at the Nuremberg trials. Said that he alone who owns the youth gains the future. And so what he did, he set out deliberately to drive a wedge in families, separate children from their parents, get all the children into the Hitler Youth and get them in the government. He was actually the first world leader in human history to make it a crime to educate your own children at home. And after all the denazification, that's one of the laws that they kept on the books. You still couldn't homeschool your kids in Germany, and you still can't to this day. But I want to show you that the same exact tactics are now coming to America, and it's not happening in the shadows anymore. They're telling you on national television. So here's Melissa Harris Perry on MSLSD.
Never invested as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
All right, there you go. They're telling you on national TV. Okay, your kids don't belong to you. They belong to everybody. Okay, we're going to have collective child rearing. And this, of course, has been the policy of the federal government for quite some time. These came out during the final years of the Obama administration, U.S. Department of Education, and Health and Human Services. You can read this yourself. I found it on the Health and Human Services website. They said parents get to be equal partners with the federal government in the raising of their own children. But then as you read into the report, you see they don't even mean equal partners. You get to be the junior partner. They get to tell you what to do. And if you don't obey, then you need parenting lessons from the other partner. And if you don't accept those parenting lessons, then we need a more serious intervention like taking your kids from you. Okay? Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education for 7 years under Obama. Here he is talking about this crazy stuff.
There's certain kids that we should have 24/7 to really create a safe environment and give them a chance. I think all of our schools should be community centers. Our schools should be open 12, 13, 14 hours a day with a wide variety of after school.
All right, so if we don't have your kids 24/7, we at least need to make all the schools community centers so that we can have your kids 12, 13, 14 hours a day with lots of programming, okay? That's where they're going. Now, Hillary Clinton has been sounding this drum for decades. It takes a village to raise your children, and if you've read the book, you know it takes a government village to raise the children, not, the normal village. And then here's the product of the village raising our children, right? These two geniuses here, the girl there with the shaved head, she actually was running around with a communist Cuban patch on her militia jacket. And I don't know if you guys remember the story. That's from my state in Florida, but somebody shot up the school, and the kids decided they knew better than the parents. Actually, this one guy here, David Hogg, went on TV. He said, our parents don't know how to use it. Blank democracy. Okay, wait till we take over. We're going to take all the guns, and then we won't have school shootings anymore. Right? Yeah, in the 1930s, a 7-year-old could order a fully automatic machine gun from the Sears catalog. Guess how many school shootings they had? None. Okay, right. So obviously the availability of guns is not the problem. What they're teaching the children is the problem. And they do have an agenda. I want to show you that agenda before we get into the specifics of what they're doing. I think a lot of you are familiar with this, but instead of telling you, I'll just let them speak in their own words. It's a bipartisan problem, so I've got representative samples from both parties.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founder.
When we are successful, and we will be, how can you be so sure they're going to be successful? Well, it's because they got your kids, right? And I'm going to show you that they've been bragging about this for a while. If you actually dig down into what he's saying, it should terrify you. Right? He's talking about the UN's peacekeeping role. He means their military forces, those famous blue helmets that are known for raping children all over the world. True story. They're going to use these peacekeeping forces to bring about the vision of the UN's founders. Well, on one side of the table, after World War II, we had Mr. Molotov, Stalin's delegate, the guy who negotiated that deal with Hitler where they were going to carve up and enslave Europe. Yeah, great guy they sent. And then on our side, at least we had a guy there, Alger Hiss, we sent. And somebody knows, okay? They kind of wiped him out of the history books because it was bad publicity. But they really liked this guy. I mean, they liked him so much they made him the chairman of the conference that wrote the UN Charter. Then they made him the first Secretary General of the UN. And then we threw him in federal prison because we found out he was working for Joseph Stalin all along. So that's the vision of the UN's founders. Frankly, I think our founders had a pretty good vision. God gave us rights. God created us equally. We set up a government to create and protect these rights. Well, that was a good idea. Not so much the UN's vision.
Back in 1989, President Bush said, and it was a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
Yep, and China Joe, and I could do this all week, but you get the point.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
Yeah, okay, so they all agree we need a new world order, right? They've got all kinds of international agreements. They're moving us in this direction. And if you really want to understand, I can really summarize the whole program for you very quickly, and you can test it on every issue, and you'll see it works the same. Just take everything the Bible teaches, flip it exactly upside down, and then you see where they're coming from. Okay, God ordained private property. He said, "Thou shalt not steal." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. So they said, we got to steal everything. We got to just redistribute all the private property. Show you later. God created the male and female. Right? Until a few years ago, that would not have been that controversial. You don't need to be a Bible scholar to recognize biology. But now they teach the kids that that's bigotry. Okay, God ordained that there should be nation states. God created the nations. It says repeatedly God created the nations. He was upset after the Tower of Babel. So what do they say? That nations are racist. Borders are racist. We have to have just one big, happy global family. And on every issue, you'll see they come down on the same side. That is the opposite of what the Bible teaches. They also brag about their strategy. And the reason we're talking about the UN is because they're so open about it. So this is Agenda 21.
On the importance of economic instruments and free markets were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on...
So I show that because, CNN will say Agenda 21 is a conspiracy theory. Well, there's the guy who signed it. Every government on the planet signed it, and they're talking about it. But it's a conspiracy theory. And it's a bipartisan problem. Here's the leader of the Communist Party in Congress.
The Earth Summit Environmental Leadership Act, as this is known, presents us with an opportunity to follow up on the important work of the Earth Summit to develop its blueprint, Agenda 21, for global environmental action. HCON Res 353 outlines a comprehensive national strategy for sustainable development in accordance with the principles of Agenda 21.
And you guys get the point, right? So Agenda 21, it's pretty significant. Every government on the planet signed up, and according to the creators of Agenda 21, it is intended to be implemented by every person on the planet. No exemption for homeschoolers in Minnesota, sorry. Also, it will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. You'd think with something that big, they might have asked us, but no. But now, how are they going to get this, right? That's the $50 million question. They call us the bitter clingers. We cling to our guns and we cling to our Bibles. And what are we going to do, those clingy Americans? Okay. Well, they tell you what they're going to do. Go to chapter 36 of Agenda 21, and it's spelled out in plain English the entirety of their strategy. Education is going to be critical for sustainable development. It's going to be indispensable, is the term they use. Indispensable to changing people's attitudes. They say it's critical for achieving the right attitudes and values consistent with sustainable development. This is their language from their agreement that every government on planet Earth signed. They said it's got to include spiritual development. We'll come back to that. They don't mean the Ten Commandments. And it's got to be integrated into all disciplines. It's got to bombard them from all sides. Okay. This is the Agenda 21 book for children. I've got a copy at home. It was produced by UNESCO. You should read it. It's an abomination. Right at the beginning, they've got a quote by Al Gore about, we need to set up a global monitoring network staffed by children to save the planet. Okay. But you remember what I said about the rule, everything the Bible teaches, flip it upside down? All right. Well, here's one of the pictures in there. You see the deities. They're up there sitting on the clouds, and they're very upset because the storks are delivering all these babies. And what's going on here? Why all these babies? And then on the next page, you find out why the deities are so upset. Okay, it says actually right there in plain English, it's on page 41, the earth groans every time it registers another birth. Okay, what does the Bible say? It says to be fruitful and multiply. It says children are a blessing. So what do they teach your children? That Mother Earth is groaning every time a new baby arrives. Right? And all these people wonder, why won't I ever get grandchildren? It's because your children are being force-fed this garbage. And they have been for generations. Now, I've been following the UN clown show around the world for the last decade. I went down to Rio de Janeiro in 2012 for their UN conference on sustainable development. And they had all these little kids drawing these pretty posters. I took a picture of one you can see there. And maybe you can't see it, but it's the Earth, and the Earth looks very sick. And the doctor diagnoses the problem. You have humans. Okay? Humans, you're the disease on this planet. This is what they're teaching your children. Okay? Obviously, the conference was chaired by a Chinese communist, Xia Zhekung. And now, more recently, in 2015, they came up with the new and improved Sustainable Development Roadmap for the world. It's called Agenda 2030, or the Sustainable Development Goals. They've got 17 of them. And in the preamble, they say that your children are critical agents of change. They're going to use these new goals to build a better world. Isn't that cute? Because we all want a better world, right? But what does the UN mean by better world? Well, read the text. Go down to goal number 10 as an example. Okay? They say we've got to reduce inequality within and among countries. So it's not enough to just have national socialism anymore. Now we need global socialism, international wealth redistribution. They say it's only going to be possible if the wealth is shared and the income inequality is addressed. Now, where have we heard that before? Oh, yeah, Stalin, Lenin, Mao, Castro, Pol Pot, and the list goes on. Right? We've heard this exact same rhetoric before. Where did this rhetoric come from in the UN agreement? We don't have to speculate. The Communist Chinese, as soon as it was approved by every government on planet Earth, they put out press releases in all of their propaganda media. They said, we played a crucial role in developing Agenda 2030. So is it surprising that it calls for international communism? Well, what's their strategy? They still got to deal with us bitter clingers. I'm glad you asked. In goal number 4, they tell you, okay, your children are the strategy. They say that by 2030, all learners, again, no exemption for homeschoolers in Minnesota, sorry guys, all learners must have the knowledge and skills not just necessary to submit to this, not just to passively accept it. They need to be so brainwashed, they will promote it. Okay? That's where they're coming from. And they're telling you. And they're producing propaganda. I pulled this right off the UN's YouTube channel. Watch.
We achieve sustainable development that protects our planet and builds a more inclusive, equal, and peaceful world without education. We can't. Sustainable development begins with education.
It begins with education.
Put global education first.
There you go. Produced by UNESCO, the UN's education agency. It begins with education. Okay? That's what they are telling us. It's not my opinion that they're going to brainwash our children to bring about this plan. It's them bragging about it in the open. They're just not telling us in the fake media. Now, I want to show you how this works because they actually have a lot of practice. They've been doing this for a long time, and they are incredibly effective at changing the values of your children. Back in the early 1990s, if you had told people that within a generation or two we'd have homosexual marriages, you would have been laughed out of the room. They might have called the guys with the white lab coats to take you away to a rubber room. Right? It just was not on anybody's radar. It was completely crazy. Sodomy was still a crime across most of the United States. Homosexual marriage, that's ridiculous. Well, I'm going to show you what they were teaching your children. In first grade, second grade, and third grade, this was early 1990s in America, they had this documentary produced by some homosexuals called It's Elementary, talking about gay issues at school. Okay, they were thinking ahead, unlike us, unfortunately. But here's an excerpt from the documentary.
Let me tell you quickly the backgrounds. Today, the law says that if you're the same sex, 2 men and 2 women, you can't get married. It is against the law. And I thought that it might be kind of fun for us to sort of be pretend judges for a few minutes. What I'm going to give you is a sheet that just tells you that some people think that it's wrong for gays to get married, that it's not natural,
Those
that
are bad
it goes
people
against
with bad
what family
arguments.
is. Other people think that the state should not decide these things, that it should just be up to 2 adults to decide what they want to do. What do you think the answer to these questions are? Should gays be allowed to marry? Should they not?
And then you get the peer pressure, 5 minutes of all the kids, oh yeah, how mean that we don't let loving people get married, right? And so parents are thinking, oh, sodomy is a crime, we don't have anything to worry about. Well, they were preparing your children, and then what happened? 30 years later, the pretend judges on our Supreme Court struck down marriage laws in all 50 states. I mean, they couldn't even get this passed in California, right? The land of fruits and nuts. You guys want a homosexual marriage? No thanks. But the pretend judges on the Supreme Court can do it, and the young people were already prepared, right? Now, we're here, right? The drag queen story hour, obviously that's a guy wearing a dress and some demon horns, so you know where it came from. Straight from the pit of hell, obviously. And then here, the school teachers marching in the pride parade. Here they're walking their dogs, goodness gracious. Now we're at the point where ABC Fake News, one of the big mainstream networks, they've got drag children on TV. Okay, all this was made possible by the brainwashing in the government schools. In the interest of time, we'll skip some of the videos, but the reason I bring the videos, by the way, is because I don't expect anybody to believe this stuff unless I bring the receipts, because it's crazy, it's horrible, it's evil, and so I don't want you guys to take my word for it. I want you to see them speaking in their own words. Now, they were very successful in training our children that the pretend judges should strike down our marriage laws. Well, I'm going to show you now what they're teaching. It's one of many things, but the significance of this is hard to overstate. When we were younger, at least when I was younger, I learned that carbon dioxide was the gas of life. Humans exhale about 2 pounds of it every single day. Plants use it for photosynthesis. It's just this beautiful cycle. Well, not anymore. Now they teach children that carbon dioxide is this horrible, dangerous, evil, toxic pollution, and we can only save ourselves from this horrible, toxic pollution by giving taxes to the United Nations. And that sounds absolutely bonkers. It's insane. And yet, if you teach it to a kindergartner and mom and dad said, listen to the teacher, they'll believe it, right? So here's what it looks like in a government class.
You've heard the reports. The globe's warming. It's our fault, and the consequences will be terrible. Children are frightened.
I worry. My mom worries. The water might rise and it might flood the whole town.
We won't be able to survive for long.
What are you most worried will happen?
We'll all die.
Are there some people who say this isn't true?
Yes.
Might they be right?
No.
How do you know they're not right?
Well, because the earth is getting hotter.
Where do you learn this?
It's like a new thing called, right? Don't drink the Kool-Aid. But actually, it's public school in Florida.
What are the main components after educating the students of global warming is that they're given a letter for their families to sign, and this is the congressman or woman.
A letter for their after you educate them, you give them letters for their congressman, okay? See what they're doing, guys? They're weaponizing your kids against you. Now, from a scientific point of view, this is absolutely ludicrous. I've interviewed dozens of scientists, including the UN's own scientists. They'll tell you it's garbage. I interviewed Trump's climate advisor, Dr. William Happer. He says the planet is starving for more CO2. That's why farmers pump it into their greenhouse. He said plants were designed to live in an environment with 4 to 5 times as much CO2. But they're teaching your kids that CO2 is a toxic pollution, and that unless we pay the UN taxes, we're all doomed. Okay? This, from a totalitarian perspective, is critical. There's nothing you can do that doesn't produce CO2, and I mean nothing. You can't eat, you can't breathe, you can't sleep, you can't even die without emitting CO2. And if you accept the notion that CO2 is pollution, everything you do is polluting, and therefore everything you do needs to fall under the jurisdiction and the taxation of government and the United Nations.
You think the purpose of
here's the purpose of
reading,
school.
writing, and arithmetic. The purpose of education.
And actually, I should stop here. Charlotte Iserbyt, she's become a good friend of mine. She was Ronald Reagan's senior advisor on education until she figured out what was going on at the Department of Education. She said they were merging the U.S. and Soviet educational systems. She started leaking the documents to the press. Obviously, she didn't last very long there. But here she says, what's the purpose of education? And she'll explain to you. We think it's reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, listen what she says.
You think the purpose of education is reading, writing, and arithmetic? The purpose of education is to change the thoughts, actions, and feelings of students.
Yeah, and don't take her word for it, because she was opposed to this. Now I'm going to show you Shirley McCoon. She was writing national standards before almost anybody knew we were going to have national standards. Okay, she was with a contract with the Department of Education. Here she is speaking to the 50 state governors at a conference convened by George H.W. Bush. Listen carefully to what she says.
Fix up these schools and taking care of them, rather than the issue of understanding that what we're into is a total restructuring of the society. What is happening in America today and what is happening in Kansas and the Great Plains is not simply a chance situation and the usual winds of change. What it amounts to is a total transformation of our society. We have moved into a new era.
Total transformation of our society. Okay, total restructuring, she calls it. Now listen to the role of the schools. Okay, she was the one designing the national standards. Listen to what she says about how they're going to make this happen.
The other function of schools, which sounds paradoxical and yet in a sense is really not, is the fact that we have to prepare students not for today's society, but for a society that's 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And so we have to anticipate what the future is.
They use their crystal ball for
and then move back and figure out what it is we need to do today. That's called anticipatory socialization, or the social change function of school.
Huh. How many parents do you think send their kids off to school thinking there's a social change function of schools? Probably not a lot, right? Now, this lady is an absolute wackadoodle of the highest order, and we'll come back to this. She co-wrote a book called The Light Shall Set You Free, and they talk about how they're communicating with these spiritual entities. They call them ascended masters. So just to give you an idea of where she's coming from, right? And we'll come back to that. Now, what does this fundamental transformation look like? What does this social change function look like? Well, we see it in the gender and the sexuality madness at a school in Florida. A little girl decided she was a little boy, so the school right away said, hey, go shower and change and go to the bathroom with the boys, honey. And by the way, Mr. PE teacher, you have to go in and supervise all this, because that's your job. You got to go supervise the boys' locker room. And he said, well, I can't do that. You know, like last week, that was a crime, and I would have gone to jail for watching an underage girl get naked. Well, you got to. Well, I can't do that. Well, not only are we going to fire you, we're going to take away your teaching credentials, so you will never teach again in the state of Florida. We pried the emails loose. They said, we got to make an example of this guy so that he will not inspire anybody else to resist. Here in Minnesota, that equal partnership, you guys remember, right? Probably most of you have heard this story, but there was a boy who decided he was a girl, and mom said, no, sorry, son, forget it, nope. Well, the equal partner in this relationship knew better, and so they took this child to a medical facility, and I use that term very loosely, and had his genitals surgically removed. Okay, part of what they call a sex change surgery. And this ended up in federal court, and guess what? All the federal court cases in the world will not result in the reattachment of the private parts that are gone. This came from California, which is kind of at the forefront of the madness. I pulled this right off their Department of Education website. They've got a gender transition plan and an individual transition plan. And the kids can download this. They fill out the form. What's your preferred pronouns? What gender are you? Do your parents know? What name should we call you? If your parents don't know, we'll help conceal this from. And we'll help get you ready for your hormone treatments, your surgeries, whatever's going to come. These are for kids, guys, in total violation of their parents' parental rights. For 5-year-olds, they had in their health education framework this book here, Who Are You? That teaches there are infinite genders. You can be agender, bigender, trigender, neutral, free spirits, things I can't even pronounce. And if you disagree, you're a bigot and a hater. Okay, this is what they have for teens in middle school. You can't even talk about some of the things here in polite company. It's so horrifying. This is something that was sent out by the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in America, the largest union of any kind in America, more than 3 million members. And listen to what they say. They teamed up with the Human Rights Campaign, the most vicious LGBT group in America, the ones that want to pass the Equality Act to take down churches that won't bow the knee. Listen to what they sent to their teachers.
Hi, your name is Emma, correct? And my name is Z. What pronouns do you use?
I use she, they, them. What pronouns do you use?
I use they, them, and also just Z. And so instead of being a boy or a girl or something undefined or in the middle, I kind of like, just use my name. You know, my name is Z. So if you just use Z instead of a pronoun, it's like more personalized and like less fitting into a binary.
Yeah. And now, what do your teachers think about it? Do your teachers know to ask you your pronouns?
You said it's cool when teachers ask pronouns? That was never a thing when I was like in elementary school or even middle school. Did you find that you had to like ask for that or like even educate your teachers?
Well, when I had a substitute, sometimes I had to.
Okay, only when you have a substitute. It's so entrenched now that even the teachers all know you got to ask the kids pronouns. Okay, they are facilitating this madness, and it's very, very effective, folks. I went to school in the 90s. And I lived in 8 countries on 4 continents. I met thousands of kids from every conceivable background, religion, race, country, whatever, anything you can imagine. Okay, I never once in my whole childhood met a boy who thought he was a girl. I never once met a girl who thought she was a boy, much less something in between or undefined. Right? Never. The word transgender wasn't in the dictionary when I was a kid. Okay. Well, today, this study out of the University of California at Los Angeles, this came out 2 years ago, they found in their survey that 27% of the children ages 12 through 17 were now self-identified as gender nonconforming. So, maybe not a boy, not a girl, something in between, something else. 27%. Okay, you think that all happened in less than a generation without some sort of outside intervention? Of course not, right? I live in a conservative school district. This is not a problem where I live. Well, I was in Utah giving some talks on this, and I had the opportunity to meet some of their state school board members and some of their policymakers there, and they gave me this data. It came out of the state database on medical prescriptions. And what they told me and what they showed me with the data was that there had been, in the state of Utah, one of the most conservative states in America, a 10,000% increase in 5 years in the number of underage children going through what they call medical transitions. So they're injecting testosterone into little girls, they're injecting puberty blockers into the kids, estrogen, preparing them to mutilate their genitals. Okay, 10,000% increase in 5 years in one of the most conservative states in this country. It's everywhere, folks. There's no place in America left where the public school system is safe. And it gets worse, if you can believe it. Okay, the final frontier, the last taboo, you don't touch the kids. Well, that's coming down too. Okay, this was sent to me by a concerned mom in California. She found out, they passed that mandatory LGBT history indoctrination program, and she sent me the slideshow that they were using in the classroom about the history of the LGBT stuff. They start with Harvey Milk, the pervert who raped multiple children, some of whom went on to go kill themselves, and he started the LGBT revolution. Well, as they go on, they start teaching the kids about ancient Greece and how the men there used to have lots of sex with boys, and it was totally normal and no big deal. Okay? And so she says to the assistant superintendent for curricula, the person responsible for overseeing all this, why are you teaching my kids pedophilia? What's wrong with you? Okay, listen carefully to the answer that she gives. Different types of sexual orientation, right? Do the math, guys. Okay? It is now against the law, thanks to the Supreme Court in every state, to discriminate based on someone's sexual orientation. And they're teaching the children that raping children is just a different sexual orientation. So we recognize that it would be insane to put a pedophile in charge of the Sunday school ministry. But what happens when these kids get out? And then you're discriminating against someone based on their sexual orientation. Okay, do you see where this goes? Do you see how they plan in advance and prepare? It wasn't an isolated incident. Here's another school in California. Pedophilia as sexual orientation. Yeah, they're going there. And if we don't do something, that's what's coming. Okay. Now, the UNESCO, Kimberly touched on this a little bit, the UN's education agency, they are full on out of the closet. This was an international technical guidance on sex education. They want to teach 5-year-olds about masturbation. They want 9-year-olds to be able to defend legal murder of babies. Okay, and it gets worse from there. And it all goes back to this guy here. We were talking about Dr. Judith Reisman, may she rest in peace. She was the one who exposed all of this. It all goes back to Alfred Kinsey, the pervert, pedophile, responsible for the rape and sexual torture of hundreds, maybe thousands of little children under the guise of science. Okay, she actually pulled out the charts from his books, table 31, 32, 33, and 34. They meticulously documented they were raping babies. Okay, babies younger than a year old. And they would rape them and sexually torture them for an entire day. And they'd say, look, they're screaming and passing out. That must be a climax. This means children are sexual beings from the time they're born, and we need to get them sexualized and get them ready for sex the second we can get our hands on them. And I'm sorry to have to explain that to you, but it all goes back to this sicko. And it was all pseudoscience. It was all a lie. And yet, this is the foundation for the sex education that now absolutely permeates our education system. And if that makes you want to throw up, good. You're still a normal human being. Praise God. Now, we get the idea that our kids are still going there to learn how to read, write, and do math. Baloney. And you don't have to take my word for it, okay? The Common Core standards, they put 2 subject matter experts on the commission, the validation commission, hand-picked people who would say, yeah, these are good standards, let's use them. 2 subject matter experts, one in English, one in math. They both refused to sign off. Dr. Sandra Stotsky, she said these are written hastily by people who didn't care how poorly written they were. It's going to reduce the ability of children to think critically. We're taking out all the great literature. I'm not signing off on that. The only math expert, Dr. Milgram from Stanford University, said, look, these are as non-challenging as possible. They have extremely serious failings. There are actual errors in the math. And so we better mandate them in all 50 states quickly. Okay? He also refused to sign on. Now, the federal government knows this is making your children dumber and dumber. They funded a study through an organization called CSAIL, and they found, and I'm quoting, significant negative effects during the 7 years in which the new standards were in place. The magnitude of these negative effects got bigger over time. They've also got national science standards. I call them national pseudoscience standards. They're not in every state yet, but they're coming, and this is all you need to know. 12 years of pseudoscience education, you will never hear the term scientific method. I wonder why. Because then maybe the kids would know that all the gender madness and the climate insanity is baloney, right? So they don't want the kids to know real science. They've got fake history. They're teaching kids that America invented slavery, that America is the most evil nation in history. The Second Amendment so the government can have a military force. You've got the 1619 Project, total fake history. You've got the People's History of the United States, the most popular school history book in America by a member of the Communist Party. Okay, Howard Zinn. Now, as for academics, again, don't believe me. This is what the federal government itself is telling you. This is their data. This came out in 2019. The National Assessment of Educational Progress. Less than 1/3 of 8th graders was proficient in math. And by proficient, they don't mean good at. The standards are so dumbed down. I mean, if your first grader couldn't do those, you should be ashamed. By the time they get to be high school seniors, less than 1/4 are proficient in math. Less than 1/3 are proficient in reading. Okay? $20,000 a year, 14 years, they can't even read their high school diploma. Isn't that cute? Here's the Undersecretary of Education.
The National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, which is called America's Report Card, reports that 2/3, get this, 2/3 of American 8th graders are not proficient in any core subject.
Think about this as applied to any other industry or business. Imagine like a roofing company, and less than 1/3 of the roofs that they were building were actually working as roofs. I mean, that guy would be in court so fast your head would spin. Right? Think of a hamburger joint. They say, oh, just give me money and I'll give you a hamburger. And then you open it up and it's like a big rat. Right? They would not be in business for very long. And yet, what do they say? Oh, just give us more money. What? Really? So what are they doing in class? Well, they're going to field trips to mosques, right? They got the 5 pillars of Islam on the wall in Kansas. Notice there's no 10 commandments. That would bring a lawsuit. They got mindfulness education, which is just Buddhism. The Buddhists will tell you this, and the mindfulness people will tell you this. It's Buddhism. You can have Buddhism in the classroom. You can also have yoga in the classroom, which is, of course, Hinduism. You can have, you can summon ancestor spirits. This is National Black Lives Matter training for teachers. Okay, here they are teaching teachers to teach children to summon ancestor spirits in the
And I'm
classroom.
going to ask you to hold an ancestor in your head right now. Ancestors watching, I know they're watching. Ancestors watching, I know. Now call out your ancestors into the room. Loud so we can hear you. Elevator. It only took us 5 minutes to shift the energy in this space together.
All right, little kids, today we're going to summon ancestor spirits. Sorry, guys, but don't even mention those 10 commandments. The ACLU might come around. Right? So how do they get rid of Christian privilege? This is a U.S. Department of Education document. How do we get rid of Christian privilege in the schools? So U.S. Department of Education document, well, we can infuse the curriculum with traditions and intellectual traditions that originate in the Muslim world. That's cute. In North Carolina, this was years ago, they forced all the Christian kids to stand up in front of the classroom and apologize for their Christian privilege. True story. And now the data gathering, right? This is mind-blowing. So these I pulled right out of U.S. Department of Education reports. We'll focus on the facial expression camera. You can read this document yourself. This came out in 2013. They say that this camera monitors the facial expressions that students make when they're exposed to different stimuli. Like, maybe hypothetically a guy with the demon horns and a dress comes in and says, "Hey, boys and girls, we're going to learn about transgenderism today." And your kid makes a face. What? That's not good. Aha, this one needs an intervention. So the computer and the algorithm will tell you, all right, we got to circle back to get this one because he's got the wrong attitudes. Okay, that's what they're doing. They are gathering hundreds of data points on every child. What are they doing with all this data? Well, for one, they're manipulating their attitudes, values, beliefs, and behavior, and they're bragging about it. Social emotional learning, that's all it is, folks. And interesting, I wrote an article about this in the Epic Times. You can read it. I think I'm the one who discovered this and publicized it, but it's right there on the CASEL website, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And what they say is these ideas originated at the Fetzer Institute. So I quickly looked up the Fetzer Institute. Turns out it's run by a New Age guru who was a big fan of Alice Bailey. We'll come back to her. She was in communication with spiritual entities, and education was their big thing. So we'll come back to all that. Now, what are they doing with all this data? Well, they say that the big data captured from users' online behaviors is going to enable the algorithms to infer the user's knowledge, intentions, and interests. And here's the kicker: to create models for predicting their future behavior and interests. Okay? That's where they're going with this. Now it's being supercharged thanks to the coronavirus. Everything now has moved online. They are gathering every little bit of data. It's being stored permanently. They're creating files on your children. They know more about them than you do. They've got their mental health, their dental health, their nutrition, their attitudes, their family's attitudes, what kind of food you have in the fridge, how daddy talks to mommy. Does anybody in the home smoke or drink? All of it is being vacuumed up for Big Brother. Now, part of this, they're moving toward what they call a Great Reset. And this guy here, Klaus Schwab, the head of the World Economic Forum, has been very vocal about what education means for the Great Reset. You should read his books. They are absolutely terrifying. And he says that the Great Reset is going to be engineered through the education system. He talks about it extensively in his book, COVID and the Great Reset. Okay? Here he is talking about a big part of the Great Reset, the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Okay, it sounds like science fiction, but these people are bragging about it. And by the way, when he made the announcement about the Great Reset, he had the head of the United Nations, the head of the International Monetary Fund, and the heir to the British throne right there on stage with him. Okay, here's what he said.
It's at the end, what the Fourth Industrial Revolution will lead to is a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological identities.
The fusion of our physical and our digital identities. Okay, and as you read his books, the stuff gets so weird. He's talking about putting microchips fusing them with the brains of people, and it gets way creepier than that. And that's where they're going, folks. That's what they're talking about. Now, here's another part of the Great Reset from the World Economic Forum, and they're making predictions about what's coming. This one's interesting. The very first one, by 2030, you will own nothing, but you'll be happy. Okay? So we'll leave it at that. But that's where they're going, folks. And they know they got to prepare the children for it. So who owns nothing? Slaves, prisoners, serfs, and cattle. Okay? Take your pick. None of those are good options. Now, part of the way they do this, and I remember this as a child, and it was very traumatic, they call it values clarification. They've been doing this in the schools since the 60s. They know it's very effective. One of the guys who was involved in the development of this, Benjamin Bloom, he bragged that in 1 hour they could undo everything that parents had tried to do over 16 years. Okay, and the way they did, I'll just show you how they did it to me. And I remember this like it was yesterday. They said, all right, so you're on a ship, and the ship is sinking, and you're all going to jump off into the life raft, and there's only space for 10 of you, but there's 11 in there. And so now you've got to find out a little bit about each of the people in the life raft. So you've got a doctor and a teacher, and you better not pick the teacher or you'll flunk the exercise. You've got a lawyer, and you've got a surgeon. And so who are you going to throw overboard? Who are you going to murder for the sake of the collective, for the greater good? And of course, the correct answer is lawyer, obviously. I'm just kidding. I know there's even great lawyers in here. But so if the kids would put on their thinking caps, they'd say, well, we don't have to murder anybody. Like, let's just take turns. I'll swim next to the raft for 30 minutes, and when I get tired, we'll rotate, and then we don't have to kill anybody. But what are the kids supposed to think? Well, Mom and Dad said we shouldn't murder, the pastor said we shouldn't murder, and the Bible said we shouldn't murder. They were all wrong. Clearly, there's a time and a place to murder people. It just depends on the situation. So ethics and morality become relative. And what happens? It shatters a child's understanding of right and wrong. It shatters a child's trust in their parents and in their pastors and in their Bibles. And it completely changes their worldview in a matter of moments. Okay? It is devastating to little kids. They grew up hearing from Mom and Dad that there's right and wrong, that you shouldn't murder, and suddenly that's not true anymore. Okay? That's how effective this exercise is. That's why the vast majority of people in America today, and especially young people, don't even believe there is an objective right and an objective wrong. This was strategic. It was engineered. Now, back in the 80s, even before I was born, the Ronald Reagan administration put together a commission, the National Commission on Excellence in Education, and they found, these are from their report, that our very future as a nation and as a people is under threat as a result of this baloney we call our education system. They said if a foreign power had done it to us, we might have viewed it as an act of war. And I think we should view it as an act of war. It was. It just wasn't necessarily foreigners responsible for it. But it wasn't always like this, right? Long before we had a government education system, we had the best educated people on planet Earth, bar none. Okay? John Adams wrote a letter to his friend, a native of America who can't read or write is as rare as a comet or an earthquake. You might see one from time to time, but they're very rare. Right? Go read the Federalist Papers. These are written for average, normal people. Farmers, shopkeepers, blacksmiths, shoemakers. Right? And go find a college student today who can read them even in modern English. It just goes right over their heads. Right? They're incapable of comprehending it. This was a study published in 1812 by DuPont de Nemours on literacy in America. He found that not more than 4 in 1,000 young people were unable to write legibly, even neatly. Okay, I'll confess, I can't write legibly, much less neatly. And I think you struggle to find 4 out of 1,000 young people today who could write legibly and neatly. And yet back then, before we had this government school system, that was the data. Okay, Alexis de Tocqueville, who she mentioned, he had phenomenal things to say about our education system. He said in Connecticut and Massachusetts, it's rare to find a man imperfectly acquainted with the evidences of his religion, the history of his country, the leading features of its constitution. A man wholly ignorant of them is a sort of phenomenon. Right? Today it's exactly the opposite. If you find somebody who's acquainted with the evidences of their Christian religion and the features of our Constitution, that's the phenomenon. Right? How did we get here? Well, in 1776, we had schools all over America teaching all kinds of great things. A school for every interest. Poor children could go to church schools for free. We had a free market in education. And then this guy came along, Robert Owen, a communist before Karl Marx, and he actually started a communist commune in Indiana called New Harmony. And it was a total failure, as you might imagine, after less than 2 years. But he figured out the real problem was that the government didn't educate the children. That's why communism didn't work. So he put together these essays on why government should run education. Long story short, they were picked up by a Prussian ambassador. He took them back to the Prussian dictator, and the Prussian dictator said, this is a nice idea. Interior minister set up a government school system for me. Okay, so it started in Prussia, took root there. This Robert Owen also set up what was described later by a whistleblower as a secret society, modeled on the Carbonari of Europe. There was 2 main goals of this society: to get men elected to the legislature who would support a government takeover of education, and to shift public opinion in favor of a government takeover of education. Now, this whistleblower, Orestes Brownson, he came to Christ and he repented of this evil and he wrote a book about this crazy plan. You can get it today. He said the great object was to get rid of Christianity. Are we surprised? Okay. Then Horace Mann, he loved this idea from Prussia, implemented it in Massachusetts with support from the legislature. He became the first ever state secretary of education for any state. He was in Massachusetts, and he imported the Prussian system. He wanted to get the Bible out of the schools. He wanted to equalize all men using the government education system, and he wanted to promote this nationwide, and he ended up doing that. Right away, the quackery started coming into the government schools. They started teaching the teachers phrenology, right? This crazy idea that the shape and size of your skull determines who you are and your personality. They brought in the whole word method of teaching reading, which ended up being an absolute disaster. Within a couple years, all the schoolmasters in Boston said, hey, kids can't learn to read that way. That's silly. We're not going to do it anymore. So they took it out. They wrote a brilliant essay on why it didn't work, and we didn't hear about it again for 50 years. Okay? The whole story of that is actually in the book Crimes of the Educators. Now, Karl Marx was another one of these guys, big believer in government takeover of education. Okay? He actually wrote, in the Principles of Communism, education of all children, from the moment they can get by without their moms, should be in state institutions. Okay, so fast forward 50 years, and you get to John Dewey. Now, anybody with an education degree in America, oh yeah, he's the founding father of our system. And in fairness, I think Robert Owen and Horace Mann deserve some of the blame. But John Dewey was a socialist. Maybe you can call him a communist. He actually went to the Soviet Union and loved what they were doing. He wrote these essays about it. He celebrated the collectivistic mentality that they were instilling in all the children in the Soviet schools. Even in 1898, this essay was so important, we republished it in the back of the book. It's called The Primary Education Fetish. And he basically argued that we spend all this time teaching kids how to read, write, do math. At the younger years especially, that's not what they need. What they really need is to become part of the collective. They need to be socialized so that they understand that the greater good is more important than them. But he did say change must come gradually. To force it unduly, he said, would compromise its final success by favoring a violent reaction. This is the language of a conspirator, right? If parents find out, if teachers find out, if taxpayers find out, they're going to tar and feather us. So do it quietly, okay? Got to do it slowly. Well, he got himself some prestigious positions. He resurrected that whole word quackery I mentioned earlier and had it spread out all across the United States. Long story short, in 1955, Rudolph Flesch blew the whistle. He said, hey guys, the reason kids can't read is because the teaching of reading all over the United States, in all the schools, in all the textbooks, is totally wrong. Flies in the face of all logic and common sense. Very mild criticism, but right on point. Now we have brain scans. Dr. Stanislas Dehaene in France has been scanning the brains of children who've been taught to read using this quackery that John Dewey resurrected. What he found is actual brain damage in the brains of these children. Their brains get wired wrong instead of the normal way of teaching reading, which is through phonics. Okay? And you're probably not surprised at this point to learn that under Common Core, as soon as they're in kindergarten, the children need to start doing whole words. They need to start memorizing sight words. So a great core, and that is why we have millions and millions. Depending on whose data you believe, the federal government says about 50% of American adults are either functionally illiterate or so close to it that we can lump them in together because they read nothing. Okay, that's the federal government's data. Now, John Dewey was also a very religious man. He had a plan, and his plan was to use the school system to promote his religion. Okay? Now, what was his religion? Fortunately, he left a huge trail of his writing, so we know just what he believed. He wrote the Humanist Manifesto, him and 33 others. And the very first tenet, this is a direct quote, they said, religious humanists regard the universe as self-existing and not created. It's a pretty profound statement. It's also a total and complete contradiction of the very first words of the Bible. In the beginning, God created. Okay? Right off the bat, they're telling you where they're coming from. Now, even if you're not a Bible-believing Christian, I think you should be, but even if you're not, there are very significant implications to this, right? Our founding fathers said it was a self-evident truth that all men are created equal. It wasn't a debatable thing. Anybody with eyes can see that we were created equally and that God gave us rights. But if you believe John Dewey's religion, you weren't created, there is no God, and therefore you have no God-given rights. You have whatever privileges we decide to give you. Okay, that's the implications. Now, his colleagues, one of the other guys who signed this document, C.F. Potter, said education is going to become the most powerful ally of humanism. Every public school will be a school of humanism. What is a theistic Sunday school going to do 1 hour a week with only part of the children against a 5-day program of humanistic teachings? And the answer, of course, is nothing. Okay? In 1962, the Supreme Court formalized this takeover, and it had been in the works for decades, but they formalized it. They said no more prayer in school in 1962. By 1963, we couldn't even have the Bible in school anymore. Okay? They said the First Amendment requires this. If you've read the First Amendment, you know that's ridiculous. Okay, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law. My school board is not Congress. My state is not Congress. In fact, when the First Amendment was written and ratified, most of the states had established churches. So clearly, that's not what they intended. But be that as it may, the Supreme Court actually did exactly what Congress was prohibited from doing, according to one of the justices on the Supreme Court. Justice Potter Stewart, he said this refusal to permit religious exercises is not the realization of a state of neutrality, but rather the establishment of a religion of secularism. Okay? Now they're going for global indoctrination. The UN is taking over. Kimberly touched on this. If we had more time, I'd get into more detail. But in 1990, they passed a treaty saying the UN should decide the basic learning content required by all human beings. We need global standards that the UN will decide on. In 2000, they got another global agreement on education. They said we need changes in attitudes, values, and behavior, and that the schools would bring this about. Here's the Secretary General of the UN in 2015 talking about his view on the purpose of education.
Education must do more than produce individuals who can read, write, and count. It must nurture global citizens who can rise to the challenges of the 21st century.
All right, how many people sent their kids to school to be global citizens? Yeah, none. Right, okay. And you know, I'm a citizen of heaven first, citizen of America second. I have no interest in being a world citizen. Thank you so much. Now, the Global Action Plan, they came up with this in 2016. They again reiterated this thing. We got to get the children trained in spirituality. Okay, and we're going to come back to that. They've got, you know, all kinds of tools. Here's a video they produced where they're bragging about the global education takeover.
The Education 2030 Agenda is our roadmap to inclusive and quality education for all. UNESCO, the UN specialized agency for education, is leading the global and regional coordination of this ambitious goal, responding to cutting-edge global challenges, supporting countries to build better education systems, and monitoring progress to make sure the world stays on course.
Helping countries build better education systems and monitoring progress to make sure the world stays on course. But like that's just in third world countries, right? Not here. I wish. Okay, Obama's education secretary, and I've got like 10 videos of him meeting with them, bragging about this. He says that UNESCO is the global partner of the U.S. government in this global education reform. He quoted a communist terrorist. I won't tell you which one because we need another presentation. But he said, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. He said it's a global public good without national boundaries. And that brings me to the World Core Curriculum. Okay, the UN developed what they call the World Core Curriculum. They said it should be taught in every school on planet Earth. It was developed by this guy here, Robert Mueller. Total wackadoodle. He said the UN was the body of Christ. True story. Okay, and if you're a Christian, you know that is blasphemy of the highest order. Unbelievable, these standards. But what really jumped out to me, and you can read these on UNESCO's website, but what really jumped out to me, and you can get a copy of the teacher's manual at your local library, right there in the foreword, Robert Mueller says that the underlying philosophy upon which it's based can be found in the teachings set forth in the books of Alice Bailey by the Tibetan teacher Jwal Khul. And I mentioned Alice Bailey earlier. She's a bigwig in UN circles. She actually designed a little prayer room in the basement of that monstrosity on the East River. So who's Alice Bailey? Well, I'll give you a fun fact, a little hint. She was the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company. Right? They've changed the name now. Now it's the Lucius Trust because Lucifer Publishing, which is just a little too obvious. Now, this Tibetan teacher, Jwal Khul, turns out he's not Tibetan. He's not a teacher. He's actually not even a human being. Alice Bailey claimed to be in communication with these spiritual entities. She described them as ascended masters. Jwal Khul was the chief among them. If you've read your Bible, you know they're not ascended masters. They're demons, okay? But she would write these books, that they would actually write them through her, is what she said. And one of the books that helped model these UN standards was called Education in the New Age. And you can also go get this at your local library. Here's a fun quote. World citizenship should be the goal of the enlightened. Does that sound like the UN Secretary General or what? It says, with a world federation and a world brain, which kind of takes on a whole new meaning in the context of the Great Reset and microchips in your skull and Google and all the rest of it, said our problem is to attain the kind of overall synthesis that Marxism and neo-scholasticism provide for their followers, but to get this by the freely chosen cooperative methods advocated by John Dewey. It's right in the book that inspired the World Core Curriculum. Okay, now, Bill Gates, you guys know he put $2 billion of his own money into Common Core. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that in 2004, he went over to UNESCO headquarters and signed an agreement with the UN's Education Agency. Phyllis Schlafly got a copy and posted it on the internet. And they agreed that they were going to have global standards, global curricula, global technology programs, and global teacher training programs. And that Microsoft and UNESCO would collaborate to make it happen. Well, fast forward a few years, and Bill Gates brings you Common Core. And here are the Common Core people bragging about what they're doing.
To tell how well kids are doing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. Is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as a graduate in Shanghai?
Shanghai.
It turns out the answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. The standards are consistent from school to school, and they match up against international standards too.
They match up against international standards. You got Seattle, Chicago, Shanghai, and Paris. All the future slaves will learn the same garbage. Same rules. Everyone will be on the same staircase. Yep. Isn't that cute? They're bragging about it, folks. It's not me telling you that Common Core is aligning our education system with the global standards. It's them bragging about it, okay? Now, this brings us back to the polling data. Most young Americans today are socialists or communists, okay? Most young Americans today are not Christians anymore. Not even self-described Christians. That's where we're going. And so now we get to the last piece. Everything I showed you up until this point is a fact. I brought you the videos so you could see them. I showed you screenshots of the documents. Anything I told you, you can fact check. You can read the documents yourself. Now I'm going to give you just a couple minutes of my opinion. Then I'll give you the only opinion that actually matters. That's God's. And then we'll wrap it up. So we have some questions we need to ask here. Obviously, we have a problem. If you didn't think we had a problem, you wouldn't be here. Okay? So the first question, can we reform this system? Can we make it better and turn it around? Well, I wish I had a better answer for you, but unfortunately my answer is a solid no. As I see it now, we've got two options. I mean, we've been trying to reform the system for 50 years. I submit to you that go bang your head against that wall. You'll have much more luck, and it'll be less painful. Okay. So as I see it now, we've got two options. We can get our children out in massive numbers as quickly as we possibly can, or you can prepare for that little new world order they were promising you with this new spirituality and with no freedom and all the rest of it. That'll be fun. Okay, and that's how I see it. So we need a Dunkirk operation. Back in World War II, the British military was completely surrounded at Dunkirk. National Socialists were about to annihilate them. And the British people got on their knees and they prayed and they said, oh my goodness, if we lose our army, we're done. Okay? So they prayed, and then they got every resource in their society and put it at the disposal of this rescue operation. Anything that could float went across the English Channel, picked up as many boys as would fit on those ships, and they brought them home, and they lived to fight another day. And guess what? They're not speaking German today in the British Isles. Praise God. Okay, they may be speaking Arabic soon, but we'll save that talk for another day. So we need this kind of mindset now. There's plenty of resources in the body of Christ to get our children out. If our ancestors 3,000 years ago, goat herders, could educate their own children, nobody can tell me that in the richest society in human history, we can't afford to educate our own children. Okay, it doesn't take $20,000. Anybody can do it. I think at this point the message is probably self-evident. Parents, if you have children in the government education system, you've got to get them out. There's no way to have them there safely. You will. You're like playing Russian roulette, right? Except there's like 5 bullets in the chambers instead of 1. Okay? The odds are you will lose your children. I'm on the advisory board of the Nehemiah Institute. They've been studying worldview for decades. They found that 80 to 90% of Christian children from Christian homes who go through 12 years of government indoctrination will abandon the faith and leave their church. Okay, that's not a risk you want to take as a parent. They'll also hate you, by the way, and they'll hate your country, and they'll hate your church, and they'll hate the Constitution. And so parents, you got to get your kids out. Grandparents, you need to encourage your children. You need to even offer to help. Right? Maybe you can take the kids one day a week. Maybe you can help with tuition for private school. Everybody can do something. We got to get the kids out. Pastors, priests, rabbis, you need to be sounding the alarm about this. Right? If God called you to be a shepherd, you need to be protecting the flock, especially the most vulnerable members of the flock. And I sympathize. I know you don't want to alienate and upset the 2 public school teachers in your congregation. I know, but guess what? They already know everything I just told you. In many cases, they know it's even worse than I just told you. They're probably wondering why you're not saying anything. Okay? I've talked to public school teachers all across the country. They are nearly unanimous in their understanding that this is not a good place for kids. That's why public school teachers are far more likely than an average American to homeschool or send their kids to private school. Really good news. The public school system is losing children like crazy. Since the COVID pandemic started, there are some districts that have lost 15 to 20% of their victims. So we can praise God for that. Incredible things happening. And you know, when I started telling people 5 years ago that they needed to get their children out of these brainwashed camps, like, Alex, that's really fringe. You need to kind of soften the message, you know, but people aren't going to go for that. I mean, even people who are on our side, like Phyllis Schlafly, God bless her, may she rest in peace, wonderful lady. She had me on her show a bunch of times to talk about education. I said, Phyllis, we need to get the kids out. Oh, well, you know, we got to do what we can to fix it. Well, 5 years have passed, and now it is becoming accepted common wisdom, common knowledge that we got to get the kids out. Rush Limbaugh, biggest talk radio host in America, 18 million listeners daily. May he rest in peace also. In the last year of his life, he called at least 3 times that I know of for parents to get their children out of these brainwash centers. Okay, that's good news. Franklin Graham, you know, the closest thing evangelicals have to a pope in America, right? He said, after New Jersey passed this crazy LGBT law, parents, you got to get your children out of the public schools. Even President Trump said said it multiple times, we've got to protect our children from these failing government schools. Okay, and so now, what does God say? You know, we need to ask some questions on what is education really for? Who should be in charge? And who should be in charge? Right, not Caesar, okay? So the Bible says, go to Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, even when he's old, he won't depart from it. He's not talking to Caesar, he's talking to parents. Deuteronomy, you shall teach these laws to your children whenever Caesar doesn't have them. You guys are like, no. All the time, right? When you wake up, when you're sitting, when you're walking, when you're eating, when you're going to bed, you should always be teaching your children, not just when Caesar doesn't have them. Okay, fathers, you should not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the fear and instruction of the Lord. Now, the Bible actually says in the Gospels twice, Jesus says, either you're with me or you're against me. Okay, in 1950s, you might have been able to maybe say, okay, yeah, the public schools are kind of with Christ because they read the Bible and say prayers. What about now? Would anybody say the public schools are with Christ? You can't even mention Christ. They'd rather you come in with headlights or something, right? And I mean, the Bible teaches in Proverbs twice, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And we can't even mention the Lord in public schools. Do you think your children are going to get wisdom or knowledge there? The answer is obviously no. If you believe the Bible is true, you cannot also believe that your children are going to get wisdom or knowledge at school. It's just that simple. Okay, so what happens if you don't have knowledge? Well, Hosea tells us, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Okay, that's what happens. Now, Martin Luther, for you Protestants out there, any school that isn't diligently teaching the Holy Scriptures will lead them to the great gates of hell. Okay, for Catholics out there, Pope Pius XI, any education that doesn't have Christ at the center is false and full of error. Okay, so I don't care where on the Christian spectrum you fall, guys, the options are narrowing, right? Harvard was a good school one time, believe it or not. Back in the 1600s. And they said, true story, and their original mission statement, let every student be plainly instructed and earnestly practice. Consider that the main end of his life and studies is to what? To be able to make a lot of money, go retire in Florida and drive a BMW. To know God and Jesus Christ. Okay, that was the main purpose of your studies. Today you won't even hear about it. John Milton, the end of our learning is to repair the ruins of our first parents by regaining to know God aright. Now, we were blessed to be born in a self-governing country. We are a self-governing people, at least we're supposed to be. That means we have another role for education. We need to teach our children to be self-governing individuals so that we can have a self-governing republic. So, important task. Now, that's not my actual family, it's just a picture of my family, but we're homeschooling there on an island. It's a lot of fun. I can't recommend it highly enough. Great news, the Census Bureau just released 2 weeks ago new data. The number of homeschooling families in America has doubled, more than doubled, since the start of the pandemic. So, excellent news. And we're in really good company, right? People say parents aren't qualified to teach their own kids. Hey, these guys were all primarily homeschooled. And they went on to create the greatest, freest, most prosperous nation in all of human history. We can do it ourselves. The data is amazing. Homeschooling students are running circles around the victims of the government schools. Even on the government's own test, they're in the 80th to 90th percentile. It's true even if their parents don't have a high school diploma. They're better socialized on every metric that we can track. Lots of great private schools out there for those who don't feel called to homeschool, but buyer beware, there are lots of terrible ones that are using Common Core and government school textbooks and teaching your children lies. So do your due diligence. If you want to get involved, we've got a Rescuing Our Children. I don't have any with me, but it's a simple tool you can give to people. It breaks down a lot of what I've discussed today so that people will understand. We started a new ministry, Public School Exit. You can find us at publicschoolexit.com. It's a great group. We want to make sure that there's no parent in America who can't get their children out, and we want to make sure there's no church in America that isn't helping to facilitate this. So we're doing scholarships. We're working with pastors to set up schools or co-ops or scholarship programs. Whatever is needed, we're working on it. Now, be aware, they're coming for our homeschool freedom. They've told us, the UN passed a resolution in 2015 saying we can't have all this unregulated private schools and, all these homeschooling. They're not obeying the global standards. This has got to stop. Now in New York, now they want to shut down the Jewish schools, and you guys know the old cliche, right? First they came for the Jews, next they'll be after us. Okay, because they were mad. The yeshivas weren't teaching enough government propaganda. These two geniuses here, they want a presumptive ban on homeschooling. They were going to have a conference last year at Harvard, COVID canceled it, where they were going to propose a total ban on home education. This guy thinks we shouldn't even have parental rights at all. Okay, that's where they're going. And here we are, indoctrinating, dumbing down, but at least we've got our guns. Right? They'll never take my freedom as long as I got my Second Amendment. And I'm a gun guy too, so don't get me wrong. They'll get my guns from my cold dead hands. But they really don't need our guns, guys. They've got our kids. And if they've got the kids, all the guns in the world will make no difference. What are you going to do when your kids show up at your door to confiscate them? Absolutely nothing. Okay, so our founders, as was said at the beginning, they risked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor for this great country to pass liberty on to their descendants. All we're asking you to do is make a little sacrifice, right? Drive a little bit older car, a little bit smaller house, one less vacation, get your kids a good education, and we can preserve freedom in this country. And I want to close with a scripture so that nobody misunderstands. This is not just a political battle. It's not even just an educational battle. It is a spiritual battle. I was so happy to hear the representative mention it earlier. This is what we're dealing with, folks. If you didn't figure it out from that whole presentation, we are dealing with a spiritual battle. And Paul spells it out for us in Ephesians 6:12. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's why the person who wrote the World Core Curriculum cited the founder of the Lucifer Publishing Company as his inspiration, guys. It's very clear, at least it should be, and that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much. God bless you. God bless America.
All right, and there you have it. This is why I said in the very beginning to make sure that you listened intently, because he rapid fires through those facts. I mean, and there's a lot of them. So I had a couple questions before we get to Michelle, and people were asking about the presentation. It's going to be on CPL, correct? This right here, the Child Protection League. Is this for people?
Yeah, I'm going to offer people a deal, because I bet there are people who watched tonight who thought about other people that they would love to get that video in their hands. If you go on the Child Protection League website, right on the home page, you'll see the Invincible Liberty Conference, which is where this presentation was held, and it's $25 for the archives, which is actually Alex's presentation plus 3 other presentations. But listen, folks, just go make a donation of any amount of money to the Child Protection League. The donate button is right up at the top. And then send me an email telling me that you made a donation, and I will send you the link to these videos. I don't care what you donate. I want to get this into people's hands. I just can't blast it out for free, because people paid for the archives. They paid for the conference, and we just held it about 5 weeks ago. And so I kind of have to honor that for a while, but I don't care. Just make any donation, and then send an email to Michelle with 1 L, MICHELE, at CPL, which stands for Child Protection League, cplaction.com. That email will come directly to me, and just tell me, hey, I made a donation. Can I get the link to that video? And I will send you the link to all of the presentations. So get it into other people's hands if you want. It's the best that I can do right now to get that available to you.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I was sharing the screen for the CPL action. I'll also drop the link out there. People were talking about what a great job Alex had done. Yeah, and he does. Michelle gets people together. I'll give you a little glimpse of kind of what was on the one that what we just watched was this Alex Newman one, the transformational education, but also on this she's speaking about the critical race theory. Miss Davis and the Minnesota representatives are there. They do a little presentation. So does Miss Quist. I hope I said her name correctly. These are just some of what she offers on the Invincible Liberty virtual in-person conference. So there's more than Alex is on there, guys, and it's all interesting. And I believe you said something earlier about the plans coming up for you to do another video. You said that we may be able to share as well, but just so you know, I mean, I don't know if she wants to announce it here, but she let me know how much they're actually going to have to pay to fund that presentation, and it's not cheap. I mean, Michelle's not rich over here. She's trust me, she's got a small baseball team of children. You know, she's raising
exactly a baseball team.
Yeah, and she's not doing this to get rich. I mean, but I believe that maybe even some of the stuff that we do on a smaller scale here, like on YouTube with these shows, people understand, like even the investment it takes here in this channel for the things that you have to pay for to broadcast, things like that. And then to put together a very high quality edited presentation, you know, you have to pay for that kind of stuff. So I know you're not trying to get rich, Michelle. Trust me, if there's anybody here that I would donate to and ask people to donate to and support, it is you, because I know what you do with the money. You know, you're not driving around in a Lexus.
Well, none of us get paid for this work. So, and we don't have office space, right? Which I was telling you and Casey, you know, we're kind of stealth because we can show up and make a difference. It doesn't cost a lot of money to do that, but it takes a commitment. So, you know, all the money that comes in donations goes out to getting tools, out to parents, out to citizens to be able to protect their children, and at this stage of the game, take our country back. But none of us is drawing a salary off this. We're just committed to the cause. We would love to go back to our lives, just like I bet everybody watching who is out there fighting the fight to take America back would love to go back to their life, but that's not what we're called to. You know, we are called on this time, this generation, to answer the question that was asked of Ben Franklin way back when that woman said to him, you know, Mr. Franklin, what do you have for us? And he said, a republic, madam, if you can keep it. Well, here we are, you know, and we're at the crossroads, and it's up to us. Alex, I think that is one of the most comprehensive arguments for getting your kids out of the failing, disgusting public schools that I have ever heard. And it's why I'm so motivated to get that into the hands of people. But you know, at the Child Protection League website, there's tons of tools there. Whether it's critical race theory, he talked about comprehensive sexuality education. You know, there's just a whole host of not just Minnesota specific issues, but issues that are facing parents all across the country. And then Alex's website, publicschoolexit.com. Really important resource. Everything you would need to you know, explore the other options is at that website. So here we are, you know, we're at the 11th hour. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of people rising up, but it isn't going to be enough to just, you know, complain about it or to read about it. You've got to engage, you know, so answer the call wherever you are being called. You know, you got to listen to what God is saying to you, where you are being called to fight the battle, and then get in and fight the battle. But if it's children that are on your heart, you know, then maybe the Child Protection League is the place for you to get involved. And we network with organizations and people all across the country. So if you're in a different state, you know, there might be an organization there that we can put you in touch with. That would be a little more specific to your state. All that you can find at childprotectionleague.com.
Yeah, I just posted that as well as the public school exit. There's also there's a critical race training and education, criticalrace.org. Michelle will tell you this is personal for me. Ironically enough, I don't even have any biological children. Maybe that's why it's such a call for me to try and raise awareness for this, because I actually have the time. You know how it is as being a parent. You know what I mean? You have kids running around, but I mean I take this stuff pretty seriously because I see what they're doing. Just started reading the book Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. By the way, that is free online as well. I don't know if you've ever read that book, Michelle, but I will share this with you guys as well. Again, here it is. See, I'll have it in my queue. I have this pulled up. The entire book, it's 700 pages long. On top of that, they also did an updated insert. And this woman worked for the government. She was in the Department of Education. And she wrote this book, and Alex actually highlighted her. Charlotte Iserbit. I probably said that wrong, but listen. This thing is 700 pages long because she offers the evidence. She gives you the receipts for everything that she claims and everything that she says. So it's sourced, really well sourced, and it kind of walks you through when all of this started. When they started in the 30s and getting themselves involved in the government and their plan. I mean, it's literally the deliberate dumbing down of America. And I don't just think it's an American thing. I was reading a YouTube chat while I was trying to, on my phone, which, by the way, the YouTube was doing some really crazy stuff with the feed on my end. And maybe it was just because I was using my mobile app, but it was crazy. It was graying it out, all kinds of stuff. But I asked, other people said they weren't having the issue. So hopefully it was just the mobile. So I'm sending out that Deliberate Dumbing Down of America link too. I think it should be a must read for every teacher because they're being used as well. The teachers are kind of being used as the weapon against these innocent minds. I read in chat, I wish I could find it. Maybe I could scroll up. It's still doing it, by the way, on YouTube. A woman that said that, was it a woman? I can't find it. Something about her grandson has offered to, I can't find it, that he would basically sacrifice himself for the betterment of everyone else. And that's just sad. Mm-hmm. Because they're teaching these kids that they should feel horrible about just existing. Mm. So I don't know. And then Stewart said something about there were 19 young people who were jumping off the bridge, and I believe he lives over in England. And I mean, yeah, look at what they're highlighting now. Nobody ever talks about during these lockdowns and with COVID about the depression rates and the suicide rates with these kids. And that says something a lot about how they feel about themselves and being locked inside and not being able to socialize. And then when they do, they go onto a smartphone and they're more concerned about a like button, right, than they are about having relationships with people they can physically see. They've distanced these kids from having real relationships. I think that's why it's even easier to indoctrinate them today, is because they're so removed from personal relationships with people. And you've highlighted this before in saying that, we teach our kids, because you're trying to teach your kids to respect their elders, that they need to go to school and listen to their teachers. So they think everything their teacher is saying is for the betterment of their future. And a lot of these teachers are becoming activists, not educators.
Right. They've been indoctrinated. They've been brainwashed too. If you think that this agenda and this ideology hasn't permeated higher ed and the colleges that are training these teachers, then you need to dig a little deeper, because they're getting trained into the same thing. I think it's worth pointing out to parents, because this stuff is kind of overwhelming. Look, they are so afraid of you, parents. They know that you can defeat them. They know that you united together, fighting back against the school board, is they can't win against you. And they know that they can't take your kids' minds if you're actively involved in fighting to preserve those minds and to teach your children. And I'll give you a couple examples of this. One is the country of Hungary. When Hungary fell to communism, the communists knew that exactly what Alex was talking about, that they had to get to the children because the parents, they were Hungarian. They already had their Hungarian identity, and they could see what was happening to the children in the government schools. And under communism, obviously, there was tyranny, there was no dissension. And so what the parents did was, at the end of the day, they'd turn off all the lights and they'd take their kids down in the basement and they'd start to undo everything those children had learned at school that day. And they taught them about their history, the history of the Hungarian people, the faith. And they asked them, what did you learn in school today? And they had to literally dismantle it under that tyranny. We're not quite under the tyranny. The fact is we have a lot of power to be able to do something about it right now. But if we fall, then we're going to have to be like the Hungarians, and we're going to have to do it in secret. But they still succeeded, and they were able to win their country back. And those children that the parents did that with went on. They hadn't lost their identity, their love of faith, God, family, country. The other example I want to give you is Poland. Poland was literally wiped off the map. Poland ceased to exist as a country. I mean, how could that even be that they came back? They came back because they had three things. Their love of God, their love of family, and their love of country. They never lost their identity as a Polish people. And so they were able to eventually, with the help of, outside forces and from within, defeat communism, and they restored their country back where it had ceased to exist. Don't give up. There is no match against you actively involved in your kids' life and teaching them yourselves. And if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to bring up a good point as well that Sassy and Frass said. She said teachers are on the front lines, are on the front lines, and should stand up against this too. And I believe, I can't imagine being a teacher that sees what's going on and you feel like you're it's like to me, it's like it's what's happening in the country today and in the world. It's like you have this 5% of really, really loud people that scream a lot, and they all send around this list of numbers to call, and they're all the ones trying to set the tone for the rest of the world. The majority of the people, I don't believe, support this kind of agenda. But right. You can't just say that. You actually have to also be the one that makes the calls, or you have to show up to your, governor's office or your mayor's office and demand that something be done, that they stop allowing this to happen. And if people don't start speaking out, what do you think is going to change? It's like they get away with a little bit more every day, and they think, well, I can't believe we got away with it. Let's do something else.
Yeah, so, get involved right locally in your school board first. Get together, get some parents together who are willing to be a watchdog on what is happening. Begin to build that coalition, and then begin to expose what's happening. And you have way more power at the school board or your city council than you think you do. And they will try to intimidate you, but they are afraid of you. I guarantee it. They're afraid of you, parents. And they have every right that, should be afraid of you because you're quite powerful. And so, I think that's really important for people to understand, that there's a lot of good teachers out there, right? We all know them. We know they are, and hats off to the ones and what they've had to struggle with in the last year under COVID. There's no denying there are good teachers, and there's a lot of good teachers who went to college for all the right noble reasons, but they were subject to the indoctrination, all of what Alex talked about, and without having the discernment to question that, right? And then the schools are given dozens and dozens of mandates from the state and the federal government of things they have to do. the free hot lunch program is kind of the prime example. We'll give you, tons of money, to provide free lunch for low income people, but there's all kinds of strings attached to it. And so even good school administrators, good school teachers, they have to deal with the bureaucracy and the system. The system is broken there. And I am leaning more towards Alex that I don't think there's any way to fix it. And for sure, don't try to fix it while your kids are there. Get them out, take care of your kids. And then we'll fix, this mess.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Well, I'm also excited, Casey, don't forget about Casey. We kind of talked in it's interesting to hear if Casey has any questions for you as well, because, we have spoke about this at length for now a couple of years. So Casey, did you have anything that, that you would be interested in asking Michelle?
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's amazing though, like watching that whole thing, because just talking about what has changed in the schools, like even like since the early 90s. And I had mentioned before, like I didn't have like a lot of memories of my childhood, but as I was watching that, I was remembering like, oh yeah, I had to go to a Muslim, like a mosque for school. That was just like a part of school. And we had to do a play on climate change. Like even whenever I was doing all of that, like I don't know, you just think of it as one more thing you have to do at school whenever you're going through it. But like, I'm watching all this and I'm like, yeah, I did that. I didn't know who was having me do that, but I did that. Whew. But so my main question that I have after watching that, because like it's a lot of emotions whenever you want to help children. And if you're not homeschooling, if you don't have kids and you can't do that, you had mentioned like the Child Protection League on the website, you have tools for helping parents become more independent and powerful with their school systems. What exactly does that mean? Like guidance on just what to do? Because I really do feel like that's a big part of it. Just where do you even start asking questions?
Right. So we have a lot of informational tools that you can share with each other to get quickly up to speed on what the issues are and what's the facts about them. So anyone who's like, well, I would go talk to, my school board, but I don't know what, you guys know about it. So we have fact sheets on there. We have toolkits on there, depending on, on what the issue is. There's a comprehensive sex ed toolkit. There's petitions. There's flyers that you can print out, or you can contact us and we'll mail you flyers or, palm cards that are about that big. That would be a tool that you could use with other people to help inform them. All right, let's say your issue is, no, I'm going to go to the school board. I'm going to go deal with this stuff. For example, one of the tools that we have on the website is a comprehensive sex ed evaluation tool. It's actually a packet of material, how to go to your school board and tell them you're concerned about comprehensive sex ed. You want to know what curriculum are they using. And then we have an evaluation tool that's called the 15 harmful elements of comprehensive sexuality education. We did this with a couple of parents. It's got to be organic. Like you, the taxpayer of your school board, you have to be the one, right? I can't go in to your school board and do that because I don't have the same power that you do as a taxpayer voting member, who put those people on the school board. Well, we had a couple parents do it in this one district. They went to the school board and they said, we're concerned about, comprehensive sexuality education. And we want to see your curriculum. And so they set up a time, went in, met with, whoever the bureaucrats were at the district, and they showed them their curriculum and they pulled out the analysis tool. No, this school district told them that they were using an abstinence-based curriculum. And when they used the analysis tool, they said, well, your abstinence-based curriculum has 12 of the 15 harmful elements of comprehensive sexuality education. And so they were then able to work with the school district to, to clean it up, or, in some cases, you're going to have to take it farther. And if they won't clean it up, and then you got to get the school board involved. And if they don't get involved, you got to throw them off and replace them with school board members who will do it. It's why you need a coalition, even within your community. Does that answer the question, Casey?
Yeah, I think it does, because it's, and I can see why you need support. So as somebody who, none of the children in my life live in the area where I live. So the school district that I'm in, none of them are there. So the best way for me to be there for like my little siblings is to just educate my parents, like give them as much information as possible, because there's nothing that I can do technically with their school to influence anything.
Right. And you could, educate your friends who have kids, or maybe you could be the person who led a community, a district-wide watchdog group. I've run across people, they would create a Facebook page, and it would just be, like take any city, or school district in your area. The Chisago County watchdog group. And they would just start posting things, right? And they would just begin to grow that community of people within the county who were interested in those topics, and started to just share the information that way. That's a good way to build a team, so that when something comes up, let's say there's a levy that comes up, or you're seeing the stories about critical race theory all across the country, and parents who are going back and pushing against the school board and saying, we don't want that. It always takes a few people who are willing to stand up first and say, we got to do something about it, and I'm gonna do it, right? And I guarantee you, for about a week, you'll stand alone, right? And it'll be like, where is it? Come on, people. I can't do this alone. But eventually, people start to join the team. But there's got to be a couple people who are willing to take the arrows first, and the criticism and whatever. Do you love your country? Because we're going to lose it if we don't fight back. Maybe, people like you, Casey, would be the one, because for a lot of parents, they're afraid of retribution. They're afraid of retaliation against their kids if they speak up. You might be the one who can speak up because you don't have a dog in the fight. But, you do have a dog in the fight at the larger level, because it's our country.
Yeah, everybody has a dog in this fight, really. That's the huge thing about it, because it's so right as far as child development goes. If someone else is educating your child while they're young, they're going to pick up on that education. It's going to affect them for life. And now I can really see why there is so much depression, anxiety, like all of these like mental disorders in some of the people I know that like were highly educated, where you're just kind of surprised, like, what, you were doing so well in school, you were like, and then you see it's just because you're being taught more than just, it's not just reading, writing, arithmetic. You don't know. Wow. So anybody, I could see how it would be a big deal, the pushback that you could get from the school. And then just the people who are only halfway involved, the ones who just hear the happy, shiny words that are on the names of the programs that their kids are going to be teaching, and then they're too busy to look farther into it.
Yeah, there was a mentality for a long time, and I'm sure it still exists, where people, there's problems, but my kid's school district is all good. It's all fine. No, we're good. They're in a really good school. Yeah, maybe that's cognitive dissonance. I don't know. Maybe it's denial, because once you wake up to the reality of the threat, you have to make a decision, don't you? And people don't want to face the fear sometimes, and so they got to pretend that it isn't a problem, because if it's a problem, then they have to make a decision. But there's no better reason to go out and fight than the future of your children, or the future of other people's children who will eventually be your legislators, your teachers, your business owners. Just like Alex explained, if they can get to this generation, then the people who are running the country in 20 years will do the bidding of the globalists.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm going to say Patriot 714. Thanks for the Diamond and D-Live. Said this should be required for all parents, and I couldn't agree more. That is why it is. Listen, I don't whine and complain about. I tell you, I don't care where you get your information as long as you get it. But I'm not going to sit up here and lie to you guys and say it does not kind of personally bull my butt a little bit whenever we have these presentations and I do these interviews with Michelle, that it's not one of our biggest viewed shows. Like, it really bothers me, because I don't care who you go watch and all that. Trust me, there's not a competitive bone like that in my body. But when it comes to topics like this, it bothers me that Michelle's YouTube channel only has like 536 subs. That bothers me, because she is actually doing something to try and stop it. She's just not on YouTube talking the talk. She is walking the walk. And if we can complain till the cows come home, but if you don't actually get your ass out there and do something about it, then don't come 6 months later going, I can't believe my child was taught about an erection in class. I'm going to show this video. I showed it before the stream. I showed it on Wednesday's show. At the end of whenever I even jumped in after Daddy Dragon and before Sunny, to show you what I mean by this. I'm going to say this again. This was shown to 6-year-olds by a teacher that took it upon themselves to think this is what 6-year-olds needed to see. I'm going to stress it and stress it and stress it. I'm going to talk about it until I can't talk about it anymore. This is what we're talking about. If you don't think it's happening to you, these parents paid $55,000, I think is the tuition to go to this school.
And this means that you are somehow depriving your children. And this has driven the radicals to new depths. Today's story, courtesy of Daily Wire. Parents in New York City's elite private Dalton School have come out in force against videos dealing with the topic of masturbation that were shown to their first grade children. Parents who sent their kids to the $55,000 a year school have bombarded the school with complaints about Dalton Director of Health and Wellness, Justine Eng Fonte's curriculum, the New York Post reported. Fonte showed 6-year-olds a cartoon during her sex ed class that featured small children discussing touching themselves because, quote, it feels good. Here's what that cartoon sounded like.
And what are 6-year-olds doing in a sex ed class?
How come my penis gets big sometimes and points up in the air? That's called an erection. Sometimes I touch my penis because it feels good.
Sometimes when I'm in my bath or when Mom puts me to bed, I like to touch my vulva too.
You have a clitoris there, Kayla, that probably feels good to touch the same way Keith's penis feels good when he touches it. But have you ever noticed that older kids and grown-ups don't touch their private parts in public? They don't? That's right, Keith. It's okay to touch yourself and see how different body parts feel, but it's best to only do it in private.
I mean, first of all, I just have a question.
Again, 6-year-olds were shown that. 6, not 16, 6.
Right. That's grooming.
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's okay to touch yourself and see how it feels. 6-year-old. By the way, parents, we're not going to send a letter out advising you that we're about to show your 6-year-old this video. We're not going to tell you what's in the curriculum. We're going to send the kids home and start asking you questions that you weren't prepared to answer from a first grader, because we took it upon ourselves as the place that you send them, you tell your kids to trust, to tell your 6-year-old what masturbation is. That if you noticed in that video, they had to blur out the images of the clitoris and the penis, because again, YouTube decides what can and cannot be educated here on this platform, which is another whole nother topic. That again, I had to appeal for monetization. It took them 3 months to answer me and told me no, because we participate in hate speech. But you can go right now and watch on YouTube a channel called Dick or Dildo that is appropriate for children under YouTube standards. I'm not making this up. Monetized, and on screen, you can watch two gay men have a sheet between them, and the gay man that's laying on his stomach has to decide whether or not his partner standing behind him is inserting a dick or dildo into him right now. But this is hate speech. So I'm sorry, but there you go. Keep going, Casey. I want to give you a chance to answer questions, but it seemed appropriate time to kind of insert that to try and stress to people how important this is. I don't care if you don't have kids like me or not. I don't care if you're a grandparent and your grandchildren are grown. Like, if we don't do something to stop this or raise awareness to it, then just forget about the rest of it. Forget about the Justice Department. Forget about the vaccines. Forget about the mask. Forget about all of it. Because if we don't stop allowing them to indoctrinate these kids to become activists that push socialism, then what do we have? What's going to happen in 20 years? We're going to have a daggum Senate full of AOCs.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to hear that there's so many more kids being homeschooled more recently. Like, there was the point before, and obviously well before I even knew all this, where I was just like, why don't people just homeschool all the time? It just seems like you learn more about the world and like what you need to know growing up. Because I had a couple of friends who were homeschooled, and they were just the coolest, most well put together. Like, they knew how to do all the normal things that I didn't know how to do whenever something broke or just needed to get through the day. And realizing how much you can be dumbed down. I'm still processing it as I speak, how much I can clearly see I was purposely being dumbed down at points in my life. It's like, so I just kind of lost what I was saying because I got caught up in thoughts about it.
Well, jump back in, but I think you're describing a normal process when, you know, we find out kind of the shocking truth, or we're aware of it, but, you know, now we're grasping a concept at a much deeper level. We're understanding that it's a bigger threat. It takes something to process it. You know, Laura, can I tell them about the video project that we're working on just briefly? All right, I'm going to tell you. So we're spending $6,000 on this project. We have a problem in Minnesota that when people are convicted, right? I'm not talking charged. I'm not talking investigated. That's all been done. They're convicted of producing violent child sexual imagery, right? Videos, pictures, producing, disseminating, meaning they're trading it, they're uploading it, they're downloading it, or they're in possession of it. We have the worst standards of just about any state, and 85% of those who are convicted of possession of violent child sexual abuse imagery get probation, no jail time. You know, maybe a little bit, a month at the most in the county jail. 74% of those who are disseminating that material are getting probation only, and 60% of those who are producing it. Now, come on, people. If you're producing a video or taking pictures of violent child sexual abuse imagery, you are raping a child and videotaping it. How can 60% of those in Minnesota convicted of that crime be getting probation only? So we're trying to get the standards in Minnesota, which are very lax, up to the federal standards. And in doing that, we have to tell the story. We have to get this out to the public to understand the real life implications of the laxity of this law. Well, we interviewed some law enforcement and one mom of a victim a couple weeks ago. And I just got to tell you that one of these law enforcement people, career in law enforcement, now retired, told us about a guy who had been arrested twice. He'd been convicted for possession. He was just let out on probation. But the courts were told, the county attorney was told, this guy is going to hurt someone if you don't do something. They didn't. They just gave him probation. He got arrested again. I don't even think they charged him the second time. The third time he murdered somebody, kidnapped a 5-year-old girl, raped her, and left her in a shack to die. And when we interviewed this retired law enforcement officer, he said that when they confiscated his devices, he had torture videos on there. And he described one of the videos, and then he started to cry. And I think for the next 2 minutes, none of us could say a thing. Wow. And the reason I share that with you, Casey, is because you're not the same afterwards, right? So you see this kind of stuff, you see the threat, you see what they're doing to kids. This stuff they're doing in the public schools, they're grooming them. They're grooming them for early sexual activity. They're grooming them to be predators and to be victims because they're not teaching them any sexual avoidance skills. And when you realize that, you go through a level of shock, just like I did, listening to this retired police officer and just vowing, if it's the last thing I do, I'm not giving up until we change these laws in Minnesota. Your states might be better. It's pathetic here. And so, these people who are sacrificing so much to prosecute these cases, right, to gather the evidence of these cases, they have to look at every one of those pictures and they have to try to identify those children. Can you imagine what happens? And they give an airtight case to the county attorney. And then because Minnesota has weak sentencing guidelines, these people just get probation. I mean, at some point, our shock has to turn into anger, and that anger has to be directed in positive action for change. And that's my hope, that by sharing this kind of stuff with people, that I move you to take action. I mean, the war, it doesn't take a majority of us, it takes a committed minority. But the fact is, the majority are with us. They won't all get up and fight, but will you? Because I can't do it alone.
And that's just it, right? Like, it is horrible. Like, it's so horrible to hear this. Like, you have to, like, it weighs on you whenever you watch and learn this stuff. And so it is hard, I'm sure, for a lot of people in this world that already has you pulled in a million different directions. You have to be scared of this and this and this. For now you've just become, to some busy parents, just one more person who's screaming about, something that's going on in the school. And I'm sure because of how we were conditioned, based on what I know of how I was conditioned, people are going to say that you're just, overly religious, or just chalk it up to whatever stereotypes they want to show. So and what the people you work with have been trying to do is find the balance between educating people and waking them up, and not just immobilizing them with fear.
Yeah. And all the battles that we're fighting. So you might be somebody who is trying to educate people on Agenda 2030, or maybe you're fighting to preserve our Second Amendment, or maybe you're working, on religious liberty issues. Wherever you're called, that's where you should go. And don't feel like you got to fight all of those battles. You go and fight the battle that God is calling you to go fight. Because the enemy is the same. It's the same enemy. I think Alex demonstrated that pretty clearly. So we don't have to be the ones fighting all of the battles. And we don't have to be the expert in all of the areas. Just go where you're being called to go and you know, and fight that battle. I might pay attention to a lot of different areas, but I'm not out there fighting Agenda 21, except where it falls under the umbrella of the Child Protection League and the policies we're dealing with, right? And I think that might help people. Like, you don't have to fight all the battles. Just ask yourself, where can I be the most effective at this time in my life, right? Because another season comes along and you might be able to fight another battle. But at this season in your life, and you know, it's going to take a sacrifice, because there's a lot that has to be done. Really, if you think you're just going to be able to kind of skim through life, you know, and live for the weekend and plan your vacation and just ignore all of this, then you've got a bigger problem. You know, because those of us, if you're on Laura's show, it seems to me you're already red pilled to a lot of what's going on. So I don't think that's the case. It's just deciding where are you called to fight.
Yeah.
Might not be this issue. You know?
Processing the enormity of it too. Yeah. But that's exactly how you do have to look at it, that it is all the same enemy. That's a conclusion that we can come up with.
Yeah. I met a guy not too long ago. He's been, you know, kind of a young guy, really into all the stuff that Chris Ann Hall is doing on the Constitution. And he's just getting people together to learn about the Constitution.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of his thing. I'm like, great. Do that. Do it well, because that's important. You know, there are people who maybe they can't afford, you know, private school. Then just get a few parents together who are willing to homeschool and work together as a team and create your little, you know, community pod, or start a co-op. You know, we're gonna try to do a video by fall with the director of somebody who started a co-op in Minnesota, talking about how you start a homeschool co-op. How do you do it? You know, because not everybody has one by them. I'm telling you. You know, you just gotta believe, and you gotta think outside the box and what's possible. Come on, we're Americans. You know, let's throw off the chains, because anything is possible. We gotta work for it. It's not gonna come without sacrifice.
Yeah, and I need to stress this as well. I did it while you and Casey were speaking earlier. I'm gonna do it again. If you go to, and thank you, Vernon, for out there sharing the links. If you go to her website, this is what I'm talking about. If you go under the Take Action header up here at the top, you'll see a litany. Look right here. It says report issues of concern. Michelle will help you. She is Minnesota based, but when I say she has contacts all over the country, I'm not saying that lightly. She will try to help you. And I can't stress that strongly enough. But look, I mean, just all the amounts of information here, all these links, the school porn problem handout, PDF. Just go through here and look, or send this to someone this is their fight. This is their battle. This is something they want to get involved in, because they need volunteers. We're not talking about this is Jeff Bezos. She's not Jeff Bezos. She's not Bill Gates. She doesn't have a pocket full of billions of dollars. It's all funded by people like me and you. And this is my fight in a way. This is what I feel like I want to do on this platform, because it's so important to me. But you will find all this information here. And again, she lives in Minnesota, but trust me, she's worldwide. And I don't even doubt that she would try and find you help if you live over across the pond, because I know we have a lot of people that live in England that has also seen this issue over there. But I don't know how far your reach is, Michelle. But I don't doubt you.
One of the organizations that we partner with is Family Watch International, which does most of their work at the UN. So they have contacts in most countries, and you wouldn't have to come to us. You could go directly to Family Watch International, but you know, they're well connected. We deal with some like critical race theory, the 1619 project. That stuff's nationwide. That's not specific to Minnesota. And even if you'll see legislation on Minnesota, like they were trying to mandate comprehensive sexuality education on all the school districts in Minnesota. Our school districts are supposed to be independent, meaning that they run themselves, and they were going to mandate this curriculum on all the school districts. Now we stopped it, right? I mean, so our little organization, I guarantee you don't have to be big and wealthy to make a difference. You just have to have committed parents who are willing to stand up and be vocal. So we stopped it. We'll have to stay vigilant because they'll try again. Comprehensive sexuality education isn't unique to Minnesota. The whole safe schools garbage under President Obama, which was just indoctrination, that wasn't specific to Minnesota. That was a national agenda, but it showed up in Minnesota as Minnesota legislation, and we investigated it. Oh, guess what? It looks exactly like what Obama was putting out, right? That's happening in your state too. So there's, if you can't find what you're looking for too, contact us, because I don't know, sometimes that website is a black hole. And part of it is because, we're one of those organizations that we started because there was a fire, right? So we had to go put out the fire. And we didn't wake up and go, hey, let's start an organization and then we'll go put out fires, right? We ran as parents and we put out the fire, and then we thought we were done. And then there was another fire and another fire. And we've been trying to build the organization at the same time that we're out there fighting the battles, which might be why we don't have much of a YouTube presence, but that was never the goal, right? And so we've had when we fought the safe schools, the bullying bill, when we were fighting the Minnesota State High School League and their transgender policy, and we took out that big ad in the Star Tribune.
Yeah, briefly cover that story a little bit, because that's how I met Michelle. She told me that story. Yeah. And I think this goes to your character. So tell everybody that story about what you did.
So yeah, we put on a conference and we were like, this is it, right? The bullying bill is over. We knew we weren't going to stop the safe schools bill. We called it the bullying bill. We knew we weren't going to stop it because one party controlled all branches of government in the state of Minnesota. So we had a longer term goal. And the goal was, we're going to make them own it. We're going to show the book it's perfectly normal. We're going to make them own the indoctrination in this bill. And then we're going to go out and we're going to travel the state and we're going to educate the public. And then we're going to form a political action committee and we're going to target 4 of these legislators and throw them out of the House of Representatives. And that's what we did. And we had enough money to target 4 of them, and we did, and all 4 of them lost their election. And that controlling party, there's problems with both parties. So, I'll be the first to admit that controlling party lost control of the House that year. And then the other controlling party didn't do much better. But you continue to fight the battle. So we were just gonna, we had a little money left, let's just do a conference and we're done. And the very next week, someone called us and they said, look, will you help? There's this policy we had been watching. The Minnesota State High School League governs all high school sport competition, right? Private and public, if they compete in the hockey tournaments, basketball, whatever, this is the governing body. And they were going to pass a transgender policy telling private schools, charter schools, public schools, if you have for example, a boy who thinks he's a girl, you got to let him play on the girls' team, travel with the girls' team, use their locker room, hotel rooms, blah, blah, blah. And so we took this ad out in the paper, and it was a picture of, if you can imagine a shower stall, right? The stone tile and the faucet and the shower heads, and written on the wall, on the wall of the shower, it said, a male wants to shower next to your 15-year-old daughter. Are you okay with that? And then underneath, we put all of the names and phone numbers of everybody who sat on the Minnesota State High School League board. And it blew up. And they admitted that they got 10,000 calls and emails about that issue. They canceled the next meeting. They put it off till December. Over 200 people showed up at that meeting. They didn't pass it. Instead, they decided to pass an appeals process, which basically said, okay, we're not going to impose this on the schools, but if a kid comes to us, you know, this is the policy we'll use to deal with that appeal. Well, that issue resulted in, I had 42 interview requests the following week, maybe 10 days. I held 39 of them all over the country. They wanted to talk about the ad. And there were stories that ran in New Zealand, Australia, and the UK on that ad. So don't think that because you're not a big organization, you can't make a difference. You can.
I feel like that's such an important point because it's always like social pressure is the reason why no one wants to take the first step forward. But I've seen in my own little sister's school, she was upset over something unfair that happened. She wanted to get into this like advanced class, and then she was supposed to be able to go to a field trip. And my 13-year-old sister she decided to call a meeting with her principal and her teacher and my mom, and she laid out what she felt was unfair and why she felt it was unfair and what she planned on doing about it. And they gave in to her. And they decided that she was right. They apologized. They changed what they were doing. And it was something I was so proud of her because she was really standing up for her education there. And I remember thinking like, wow, she's so strong. Whenever I was her age, I probably wouldn't think like, oh, I think this is wrong. I should bring it up. I'd think, no, I was taught to obey. And all those people look like they probably know more than I do. So I should just go back and do what I'm doing. But I can see what you mean. If one person steps up and you're doing it for the right reasons and everybody wants to save their kids, that first step is going to be huge.
Mm-hmm.
Just people have to see it.
Yeah, don't think you're all alone, but it takes a little courage at first. Somebody has to be the first one, right? Somebody had to be the first one to walk into the store without a mask on. You know, I mean, somebody has to be the first one. Can you imagine some of these school teachers? You know, they would probably be really encouraged, you know, to have parents stand up and you know, help them. They're facing different pressures, you know, than parents are. And I know a lot of parents they're worried about, you know, retaliation. I get it. I get it. There's a cost. Somebody's got to be first. Maybe, you know, there's people out there like, I could never be the first. Okay, then just go join a team. You know, you don't have to be the first. Find a team then and join it. Because I get the feeling there's people fighting in every state. You know, there are groups in every state who are watchdog groups or lobbying groups or activist groups, you know, and if it's education, if it's you know, policy issues regarding children, contact me and let me know what state you're in, and I'll see if we have contacts in your state that we can put you in touch with. I'm sure we do in about half the states work directly with us, but the other half, there just might be, I know someone who knows someone, but there's not an organized effort, in which case you might be the one to make that organized effort. You know, be the first one.
And you can even go, what I mean by they have done so much of the work for you that you can even go to, like, if this is what you want to do, say this is what you can contribute. Even if you go to their websites and you go to one of their PDFs, like Michelle was speaking about earlier, they have done it. You print out 2 pages of this and then take this to your teachers, your child's teacher. Take it to the principal of the school. Take it somewhere and post it. I mean, they've done the work. Basically, all you need is a printer. Mm-hmm. You can find those at your local library.
But yeah, we'll mail you some too.
Yeah, so I mean, you've made it really easy. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. And for as much as I've worked in the background and some of these channels and with these movements, is you'll have a lot of people come at you and throw all kinds of ideas. They will tell you what they think needs to be done, but then the amount of people that actually are willing to put in the work and have something like that actually materialize, then there it's a ghost town. Then all of a sudden it's a bunch of ideas, but nobody wants to do the work. So that's what I commend you on, is not just floating out a bunch of ideas. You've actually given people the materials to use to do it. Mm-hmm. All they have to do is print it or contact you. And that's like one of the things I found in Alex's, when I was watching the presentation by Alex, there was actually a booklet that was offered that kind of went over what he speaks about in the presentation. I was thinking it was like $1 or something if you ordered, a significant amount of them. And I thought, what would be better use of, say money that we're going to donate somewhere, say like even to a channel, even here, guys. I mean, even here, and buy 100 of those, and then take them to your 4 elementary schools in your town or 6 elementary schools in your town and drop off 10 copies. Mm-hmm. That's doing something. That's doing something a lot more than a lot of people do. It is to me. So that's there as well.
You can get, people together now with technology and just, stream us in and we'll give a presentation. You know what I mean? It's not like we charge for any of that. If we can help a group of people get equipped and given the tools and a little training to be able to hit the ground running, we'll do that even if you're in a different state. We might have to work with you a little bit on what the issue is. Another thing that we'll do is we'll give people our graphics. We'll give them our PowerPoints. If you're going to change it, just take my logo off it. Make it your own. I mean, go make it hugely successful. Hats off to you.
Well.
I don't care who gets the credit. What's the point here? The mission is, to protect kids. Why reinvent the wheel?
Like what you're speaking about right now. Here's the PowerPoint for Alex's that was on there. Again, this is right now. They're trying to, they're raising donations for that presentation is why I'm taking the stream down afterwards. But it's all there. Like if you access this, if you go to where these presentations are and you get access to it, the PDF is there. You're watching me download it now. Every slide you saw tonight for that hour is here. It's right here.
Gold. Yeah, that's gold. He had so many good slides.
Yeah.
So Laura, don't delete this video, just unlist it, okay? Because at some point, we will open all of that up. It might not be till January, but don't delete the video, or at least keep a copy of it, because at some point you can own it. It'll be yours.
Okay. I will keep it. And what I'm thinking about doing, and this is on the fly, I'll need to speak with you about it a little bit further as well. There's a lot of movies out there that I can't freely show. I would have to do it private, but I'm going to tell everybody too that's watching tonight again, and you can leave comments below DLive. I found that out the other day. And even if you leave them over and peeled at the end of the show, I'll go back and, well, you can't really do that. Our email, the 5x5, Vernon, if you'll help me do that, the 5x5 .network@gmail.com. I'm going to say to you guys, if you can, those that want to or that have the ability to, if you'll download Zoom, which is free to all you guys. I pay for a pro account because I do these streams. I actually have 2 of them. But if you'll get Zoom, the app that these 2 ladies are on as well as me, let me know how many of you would be willing to do Zoom, and then maybe we can organize something in the background to play some of these educational things too. And whatever we take in, say for donations for that, I'll make sure to contribute some of that to CPL, like half of it, because I support Michelle, whatever. Trust me, supporting Michelle is supporting me. So if you guys would be willing to do something like that, then maybe we can get more information that these streamers want to consider hate speech and then demonetize you over and still get you that information. And it also supports us on the other side too. So if you guys can do that, let me know. Comment below, like DLive, you can go through the comments. YouTube, of course you can. YouTube is my biggest crutch. And then, the appeal. So maybe we can figure out something like that again. Zoom. Vernon, I'm talking about doing Zoom, which is what we use to, we can like share videos like we're doing right now. Right now we're in Zoom, and you can play videos, do seminars, stuff like that, that you necessarily can't do out in the open, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Because I say that because that's why I still run on YouTube. I get a lot of flack for staying on YouTube. I do. Why are you still there? They don't support you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, because a lot of our people over across the pond, YouTube is just easier for them to access. It just is. I don't want to lose all these people because YouTube wants to be buttholes about everything. I don't want to remove them from that information. So if you guys are willing to do that, let me know, and then we'll try to put something together even with Michelle, because I know you'll be back. I need you to come back and talk about this stuff. And I'll continue to ask for favors from other streamers that I know that will help us get the information out there.
Yeah.
I agree completely. Patriot said there should be more viewers. This is important for the future of America. That, again, I don't try to get on here and complain much. I just appreciate people get information, whatever channel they choose to get it from. But when it comes to topics like this, and I see how many viewers we can get, and I appreciate it. Hell, I've run the channel on our Wednesday or our Sunday to Brown tables. I appreciate all of you. But then when we do something like this, and it's like, say, one of the lowest one, I'm like, what is wrong? What is wrong? Why don't people want to learn this? Or is it just the flash and drama and all that? I don't know. It's frustrating. So I'm going to do everything I can to support you. You know that. You're welcome here anytime that you want to come on. The most thing is working around your schedule, because you are a busy lady. You are a busy woman. But yeah, so sorry, Casey, if you have any more questions, you go ahead and ask them, and I'll shut up. It's just frustrating. I want to get her information out as much as I can.
Well, I mean, I'm so overwhelmed. I don't even know if I have questions now, because you did explain where to go, what I can do from this point with all of the emotions that just got triggered up by watching all that. And I have to say that it is, like, from my perspective, a real relief to see that this is like about the information and empowering parents to take care of their own children. It's not just like, oh, everything that's going on over here sucks, so come join this cult, or like this thing we have going on. It is important for parents to just pay attention to their kids, and it sucks that you have to go to such great lengths to get them to do it, but I'm so glad that it's being done.
Yeah, that's why I appreciate what she does so much, and I don't want to embarrass her and rave about her endlessly, but there's a reason why she was one of the first people I asked to interview, and there's a reason why I continue to. It's because the work she does is important. And I will be the first to say, I know a lot of people that, come out here and try and bring awareness and talk about important topics, and those people are important as well. But if you don't have the people that are willing to put their money where their mouth is and their boots on the ground and actually fight against this stuff, not just talk about it, fight against it, then we're just all going to be talking about it 10 more years when all of our children, you're wondering why your 6-year-old is masturbating, with the next door neighbor boy, and you had no clue what was going on. Where did they learn this from? I don't know. Maybe the cartoon they were shown in first grade, or the fact that they're over trying to sexualize your children. Or how about when you find out your 10-year-old's been put on hormone blockers and given estrogen, your little boy, and you had no idea, because they're pushing to make parents irrelevant. I mean, I guess we can just put it like that. Bottom line, they're trying to make you as a parent irrelevant, because the school board, the teachers unions, the government, they all know what's best. And that's to tell your little 6 and 7-year-old little girls and boys that they can be whatever gender they choose to be. And then wonder why
they're not going to be able to take over our country if they don't first destroy the family. Because the bond of family is so strong that tyranny has to undermine it first before they can take over a country. So the answer then to tyranny is to build strong families. And all of this information, that the Child Protection League is working on, the remedy is that simple, really. It really does start in your own home. You got to build strong family bonds there, because everybody, for the most part, can kind of relate to this. When there can be all kinds of threats out there, but when that threat shows up at your front door, the family, bonds together. When there's a crisis and it's in the family, like something happens to somebody, a family that is strong, they bind together and they fight that crisis and they overcome it. That's a force. That's why we called our conference Invincible Liberty. There's an invincibility, but it comes from strong faith, strong family, and that's what makes a strong country. And those three things make a society invincible. So how do they overcome it? How do they destroy it? They start with the family. So getting to the kids is key.
Yeah.
You can see that in the Black community, right? They destroyed fatherhood. And now I think maybe there's a resurgence because they're realizing, that the powers that be didn't have their best interest in mind, but that's the first thing they did was break up the family. It doesn't matter if you have a blended family, doesn't matter if you did everything wrong, what your mistakes are, because it just starts with today. Okay, how do we make that bond stronger?
I agree with that so much, with a strong family and even a strong community. Like in my situation, I don't have family that I live with that's going to school and stuff, but even just having conversations with neighbors and caring about them and just asking what they know about what's going on in the neighborhood.
I mean, have you ever had, straight line winds or a tornado hit your neighborhood? You see, how community comes together. So it's another thing that people can do. Why don't you create a community watchdog group, a community networking group, get to know people, see if you can create a network. You don't know when that might come in handy.
Yeah.
It could be natural disaster, it could be something else, but it's got to come from the roots up.
And who knows, whenever I start asking around about it, I might find that there's already a group in my area that's working on it.
It's important. I think it's important that everyone try to, if this is where your heart leads you, to try and do even the simplest thing. Like I said, handing out, directing them to her website, handing out some of those leaflets, bringing them out, calling your school board and just asking them, well, where are we at with the CRT curriculum? And, put in some FOIA requests with the government, see what their agenda is, because they're not coming out forthright and telling you this stuff. Listen, I thought I was pretty well versed in critical race theory until I watched Alex's presentation. Remember, I consider Michelle a friend. We've had several conversations. I've interviewed her several times. I thought I had a good grasp on it. And then I watched Alex's presentation and I was blown away. So I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm.
So just make sure you educate yourself, especially when you're educating yourself on what, quote, educators are teaching your children, because it might blow you away. Even those cartoon pictures in that book you sent me, it's disgusting. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was even scared to show it, if you'll remember, on the stream, because a channel like this will get demonetized or taken down for sexually explicit material, and yet this is what they're teaching to your children.
Yeah. We had the local news station, when we took pictures out of that book, the book's called It's Perfectly Normal. It says on the cover of the book, it's a comprehensive sex ed book. It says for ages 10 and up. And we took pictures out of that book and we sent them to all of the legislators in the Minnesota House. And one of the local CBS news station did a story on this CD that we made and these handouts. And so here it is, the Channel 6 news or 6 o'clock news. They hold up this CD and they admit that they can't show the public what's on that CD. And yet those pictures are approved for 10-year-olds in school. But yeah, the local CBS channel they weren't going to show them. And I'm never comfortable. Whenever we show them, we blur them out, but yeah, they're not blurred out for 10-year-old kids in the public school. And in the state of Minnesota and 43 other states, here's an issue you can take up in your own state. In 43 other states, including Minnesota, the reason teachers can show that to children is because the schools are exempt from those states' obscenity laws. The obscenity law says that you can't show pornographic or obscene material to children, but then they exempt the schools from the law. And so that's why the schools can show that stuff to children. Well, we're working with groups in almost every other state trying to repeal those laws in the 43 states that have that exemption. So that's an area you want to get involved in, that, contact me so I can let you know what's going on in your own schools, in your own state in terms of that law, and if there's a group working to fight it.
Exactly. And I got to give a shout out to Vernon too as well. Thanks out there for sharing all the links and making sure to even share Michelle's. They do. If you guys are still, and I know there's some of you have your feelings about Facebook. I rarely use it myself, but it is a good way to get the message out. And Michelle does still have one. So ours was removed, by the way. So it is. I'm proud that she still has it, but just find her on Facebook as well. It's Child Protection League Action. You can go there, as you see, like the page and join it, and they offer a lot of information there as well. So she's everywhere. She's tried to get the message out. That's why I appreciate what she does. And her mind is, listen, I've asked her so many questions. Trust me, if somebody was going to stump her up, I think it probably would have been me, or wear her out, it would have been me. And she's always been nothing but, humble and kind and willing to answer anything I've ever asked her. So I know she would treat everybody else the same, especially if she feels like you'll be a warrior in this fight with her. That's all that I think Michelle never really asks for, is just to spread the information and to get involved, and that's what I ask everyone to do. Even if you're not in this country, remember, she just gave you an example of an organization she works with that's worldwide. So yeah, she knows what she's doing.
So I just saved some kids.
Yeah, exactly. And shut down this agenda. I mean, my God, could kids learn about math and science and social studies? Every single thing. I told these guys the other night. I found Jordan Peterson did an awesome interview, a 2-hour long interview about a young woman that defected from North Korea when she was 13 and immediately walked across the frozen Yellow River into the arms of Chinese human traffickers. Her mother was sold for $100 and she was sold for $300. She was 13, and so it is like this country is so obsessed with telling people how victimized they are, and how white people should feel ashamed of being born white. Black people will never get anywhere because they're so oppressed. And we see everything that the news is spinning while simmering underneath like a duck on top of water. The feet are moving 90 miles an hour to push this agenda into your school system. I mean, and when I brought up the little girl from North Korea, when she was in that interview, she actually went to Columbia University. She just left South Korea and went to Columbia. And she told him that the 4 years she was in Columbia, that she felt like she was back into a dictatorship, a communist country, because she couldn't believe what was being taught to her. Every single class had some part of it, no matter what it was, had this indoctrination in it. This critical race theory, or this, what's the other thing they're always pushing? Not critical race theory, but the gender studies was involved in everything. She felt like she was back somewhere where she couldn't just speak freely how she felt because she was shamed for it. And that's someone coming from North Korea. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but if we don't push back, then it's not going to stop. They're just going to push ahead.
Every generation has to fight the battle.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really true. It's not just, you can't take it for granted. You always have to be diligent.
And encourage your children to speak out. Encourage, if it's your grandkids or your kids, ask them about what's going on in school that day. You know, hey, what did your teacher teach you? Did you know what's going on? So ask them, because they're just going to come home like always and go outside and play or sit down and eat dinner and get on their PlayStation or whatever it is. And you're not going to know. So ask them.
Mhm.
You know, so that, I think that's been the upside again. What's happened with this, with what's happened in across the world with COVID, is these kids have been sitting inside the living room with their laptop open, and a mom walked by and do what? What'd your teacher say? What they just teach you today in school? I mean, that's how a lot of these teachers, these parents have been made aware. They're like, I think that's what's relevant about all these kids now being pulled out of public schools and being homeschooled. That's a reaction from that. Yeah. And again, this has been going on for years.
Oh yeah, they're far advanced in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and you've got teachers union protecting pedophiles, but you know,
they've infiltrated everything. You know, every institution in the United States.
Oops.
If we just look at the United States, I would say worldwide, there's, you know, quite a few. But in the United States, they've infiltrated every institution. You know, every government agency, every, obviously the media, you know, big business. I mean, we could go through the list, right? Big pharma, big ag, you know, the churches, the infiltration is far advanced, and still it's going to fail. You know that, right? It's going to fail. However, how much destruction of our country and our future are we willing to put up with before that? You know, I mean, America could be wiped off the map like Poland was. Hopefully we'd keep our identity and we'd come back. But that's up to this generation, whether that's going to happen or not.
And
sobering.
It's hard learning all this stuff, but I feel like more and more people are, because there's a point where you can't ignore it and you want to solve problems. And that may look really messy when everybody's figuring that out, because again, emotions run high. But
there's a lot of confusion, a lot of, you know, disinformation. There's a lot of propaganda. But I think President Trump, you know, took us through into a quantum leap of awakening. Wouldn't you agree? In this country?
Yes. Yeah.
And he's not done yet. I mean, people they're learning, you know, so, but the enemy is the same. There's always been an enemy of a free people. And it's the ideology of, you know, globalism, one world government, whatever you want to call it, goes by different names.
Yeah. That's really it. Well, I'm so grateful to have the tools. Like, I hope that we get to talk to you again, because I'm still so overwhelmed. I bet my mind is going to be reeling for days. And then as I continue to learn and do more, I'm probably going to have just a ton of questions. But right now, I kind of just want to like shake the table and computer and just scream into the air, which I won't do.
I know you have to process sometimes.
Yeah.
Yep. You can. Laura, you can give Casey my email, my phone number. I'll try to help whoever I can, you know, anyone, because gosh, I'm certainly not doing it for the money. You know, I meet, like you, Laura, great people, but I'm not doing it for that. You know, I have grandkids, I have kids. I'm doing it for them, and I'm doing it for your kids, you know, and the future of our country, which I love. And I want to see it thrive again. And I'm doing it because at the end of my life, I'm going to have to give an accounting, you know, and it's not how many toys I acquired. It's how many lives I touched. It's how many times did I stand up and speak the truth and stand for truth, you know, even at the cost of whatever. So I guess that's my motivation.
Yeah, that's why I think it's important. Again, and you know, we'll have you on more often. You're working on that on your next video.
Yeah.
And you said hopefully it'll be out by what, July?
August.
August. Okay, August.
Yeah, and then we'll come back on. We'll talk about that issue. So I think that'll have relevance, even though that's the probation issue is a problem in Minnesota. What is happening to kids is happening in every state, and I think the stories of these law enforcement and the mom of this victim, I think people will find a lot of interest in. And we're having it, professionally done. We're investing the money. It won't be a super long one though, maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, again, it's amazing to see you in action, and I'm just awed at how much time and energy you've invested in CPO, and I know it's because you care, or you wouldn't be doing it. Because I know you're not. Yeah, I know it's not for the money. You're not making it. You're
God provides, but yeah.
Put in more than you've ever been. You've ever been donated. I'm sure. So. Well, if you guys don't have any more questions, we've kept you here, Michelle, now for a couple of hours, 2.5 hours to be exact. And so we'll talk again. I'm going to talk to you. Hopefully we maybe figure out something about this Zoom situation, and then even showing some of your other presentations. I think that's important. I really do. I think what you do is more important than what a lot of people are doing. And that's just my personal view on it, because it's our kids. It's our children. We don't stop what's going on with these kids. Nothing else in my mind really matters at the end of the day, because even if we stop something, everything else going on right now, say we stopped everything else except for what's going on in our education systems, where do you think we'll be in 10 years?
Good point.
But all right, ladies, if you have anything else, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I said keep in touch.
Oh, I will. You know my number. Casey, you have anything else you want to add before we say farewell?
Just thank you for doing what you do. And thanks to all the homeschooling moms and the parents that are really just taking initiative and being a part of their children's lives and the future of our country. It's beautiful to see solutions being worked on.
Okay.
Well, great meeting you, Casey, and Godspeed to you both.
Yeah.
Well,
God bless, guys.
Again, we appreciate what you do. We will be back with Michelle, I have no doubt. And I guess with that, guys, we're going to call it a night. I'm just going to end it. We're not going to even play the outro. We're just going to bid you off. Thank you for being here. I will keep this private, by the way. Maybe at some point I can open it back up. But thanks for watching this live. I really do. All of you that gave your time and energy tonight to come watch this, I personally say thank you. I really do appreciate it. So with that, guys, we're going to say goodnight. Have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon. Me and Casey will see you back Monday.